Good evening, everyone. I am Amanda Benjamin.
And I'm Paul Carganilla, and we welcome you to our mystifying show in which we explore the mysteries of the unknown.
Sorry, I had to do something. We'll have to redo this intro later. In this live stream and podcast, we'll tell tales of the paranormal and unsolved while mixing in a little fun and live music as well.
In tonight's episode, we will explore the puzzling, cryptic, tragic topic of true crime.
Welcome to the Magical Mystery Hour.
If you're listening to the audio podcast of this episode, we invite you to find this show on our YouTube channel, the Vaudacity Network, where you can view any images or videos we share throughout these stories and see our faces as well.
If you are already subscribed to the Vaudacity Network on YouTube, but it's a challenge to find the time to sit down and watch each episode, this live stream will be released as an audio podcast.
That's right. So be sure to subscribe to the Magical Mystery Hour wherever you consume your podcasts.
This episode is sponsored by our friend, Emily Thatcher.
Emily brings us a quote from Harry Potter today. The character Sirius Black says, "We've all got both light and dark inside of us. What matters is the part we choose to act on. That's who we really are." Thank you, Emily. That quote is actually so relevant to our episode tonight on true crime, right?
Absolutely. My goodness, couldn't be more appropriate.
We've all got both sides in us. What do we act on? That's the thing. That's the scary
Ooh,
part.
That is.
Everybody's got choice. Everyone can make their own decisions, and that is freedom. That's what life is all about. But it could also be really scary depending on who that everybody is.
Dun, dun, dun.
I don't know. I'm just saying.
Just saying. Well, it's good to see everybody here in the live chat. Hello.
Good to see everyone. Thank you for joining us on a late Friday night, special Friday night edition of the Magical Mystery Hour.
I love it because then on Saturday I can sleep in.
Yes.
Yes.
Did the dogs wake you up? What time do the dogs wake you up?
Oh my goodness. It's they actually usually wake David up. It's really nice. Poor
Good.
David. I've been so tired lately. Just, getting used to getting back to work and like getting up earlier and all that kind of thing. Like I've been sleeping through when they wake up, but David kind of naturally wakes up early, where in me, I have to like get every minute of sleep that I possibly can. So, and I'm a really, really light sleeper. I don't know how I sleep through it. I must be really tired. But so they wake up anywhere close to 7, usually a little bit before 7. But
Yeah, that's my kids. It's 7:00 when close 7ish whatever day of the week it is. But yeah, it sounds like you touched on how you're a light sleeper, but you sleep through that. And that makes me curious, because I always think about how my wife Jamie, she is a very light sleeper as well, but she never wakes up when the kids come in the morning.
Really?
And so it's always daddy making breakfast and this and that. But no, I'm sure just like David, I enjoy, getting up with the kiddos in the morning.
Yeah, so. It's sweet. Yeah, I don't know how it happens, because I do. Like, I wake up at any change of light, any change of sound. I always laugh because, like, when David if he gets out of bed in the middle of the night, he's like barely, and then he'll be almost out the door and be like, "Hey." He's like, "Damn."
That's me, like, coming to bed at night. Like, Jamie wakes up early to go to work, so she goes to bed early at night, obviously. And I'm kind of a night owl. And I'm always like creeping in around midnight to go to bed, and like as soon as I open the door, she's like, I'm like, oh.
No, it's so good.
But I mean, hey, that just means if a true criminal were to come through the door, she'd be up and ready.
It's true. 100%.
And we're talking about true crime tonight, and of course, we got murder stories.
We do. I think we got some good ones tonight.
Yeah, and We love to mix in the live music and give each other hints about what our story's about. Amanda gave me some hints about hers. I mean, we didn't need hints when it comes to crime and
No.
music. Like, okay, find a song about crime. I can do it.
Yeah, they're out there.
But I actually recently had the pleasure of going on a business trip to Nashville, Tennessee. It was my first time in Nashville.
That's so cool.
And I got to experience all of the cool haunts and old music, historical musical places. And they, of course, had the Ryman Auditorium, which is like where they call the church that is the birthplace of country music. And just right off Broadway, there's the Johnny Cash Museum. And I'm going to do some Johnny Cash.
Yes. All right. I can't wait to hear it.
Here's a little song a fella's singing from prison after he committed some crimes. This is...
Oops. We want to see you.
Yes.
We only do this once a month. I'm like, buttons. There's a lot of them.
So many buttons.
All yours.
This is the Folsom Prison Blues. I hear the train a-coming, it's rolling around the bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on. But that train keeps rolling down to San Antone. When I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy, don't ever play with guns. But I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. When I hear that whistle blowing, I hang my head and cry. I bet there's rich folk eating out of their fancy dining car. They're probably drinking coffee and smoking big cigars. I knew I had it coming. I know I can't be free. But those people keep moving, and that's what tortures me. If they freed me from this prison, if that railroad train was mine, I'd bet I'd move it on a little farther down the line. Far from Folsom Prison, that's where I want to stay. And I'd let that lonesome whistle blow my blues away.
That was so awesome.
Thank you.
I can hear the Nashville in you now. You go there one time.
Right?
You can take the guy out of Nashville, but you can't take the Nashville out of the guy.
No, I had no idea. Like I had no idea what I was in for, and it's such a cool city. I was mostly just downtown for all of it,
Mm-hmm.
but I had some family members come take me different places, but
Yeah.
I just had no idea like what rich history was there, and it was really cool to explore for a few days.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it.
Darren Walsh says, "Hey, it's the man in purple instead of the man in black."
Yes. Purple. It's a great color.
I kind of match your chair,
Yes. Now, if only like you had the blue lights in the background. Perfect.
right? If I was sitting in your chair, I'd just be a floating head.
Ooh, yes, we could like green screen you there.
Mm.
Great.
Wow. Speaking of floating heads.
Oh no.
Talking about murder here tonight, or true crime, I should say.
True
But
crime,
are we really going to bring out some stories about like bank robberies or something like that?
I thought about it, but no.
I hear you have a doozy of a tale for us tonight, so we better just get down to it.
I do. Oh my goodness. I have a really long story for you. So I laughed when I started. I said, well, I have a loop of an hour and 20-minute background music, so I'll probably have to do it again.
Wow.
So yeah, let's get started.
You're an amazing storyteller, so I'm sure we will all enjoy every second.
Every second. Okay. All right, then. Here we go. I begin the story, as I often do, with a story about my childhood. So many of these stories have just gripped me from a young age, and they've seemed to just haunt my brain ever since. And this chilling case is no exception. Now, I used to spend many summer days at my grandparents' house, and while my grandpa was at work and my cousins were out like at camp or soccer practice, summer school, whatever it would just be me and my grandma at the house. Now, my grandma loved her TV. Game shows like Price is Right, Jeopardy, yes. And don't even get me started on the soaps and the telenovelas.
Yeah, quick question. I know David said don't interrupt you because your story's so long.
You can interrupt me anytime.
Did Grandma call them programs?
No, she probably. I don't remember for sure. That would be awesome, though.
I gotta watch my programs.
Yeah, I mean, like my stories, my soaps, my telenovelas, my game shows. Like
Stories. Kind of like programs.
Yeah, same idea. So we could have spent all day on the couch just consuming these shows. And in 1995, I was young, still in the single digits. But I remember my grandma watching this case. I don't remember at all what her opinion was. Guilty or innocent, somewhere in between. That didn't leave an impression on me for some reason. I just remember the most vague flashes of the court case on the screen. And I remember passionate voices as they made bold speeches. And I remember the face of O.J. Simpson as he stood, ready to hear his fate in a verdict. I also remember this voice in my head just pleading loudly, not guilty. He's not guilty. I know it. I know he's not guilty. And as the verdict was read, that voice in my head breathed a sigh of relief. I can't tell you why I was so sure. And honestly, I don't remember anything about the case. And I obviously didn't follow the news of these matters as obsessively as I do now. And when I started that, I know I started thinking about like when I started following these kind of cases, my parents, I'm sure, were like, why is our daughter a total weirdo? But yeah, back then I didn't.
What do you want to watch, honey? Looney Tunes? Murder stories. Oh, okay.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, man. Yeah. But yeah, I couldn't really tell you anything beyond the fact that a man stood accused of murdering his wife, I wasn't even totally aware of Ron Goldman at the time. I mean, how could I be? Come on, I was a kid. So again, I'll ask, like, how could I be so sure that he was not guilty? I just can't say. I've always chalked it up to just being a young girl who's hoping that there's one more person in the world who wasn't capable of something so horrible as murder. But occasionally, I wonder if that voice wasn't something a little more mysterious. Maybe a little more magical. Who knows? Now, today, I'm going to dive back into the crime and the trial of the last century. The trial whose truth often turned out to be stranger than fiction, and that played out more like a reality TV show than a court case. And I'll admit, when I first thought of looking at this case for our show tonight, I was like, oh, please, everybody knows this case. Why would you even touch that? But the more that I looked into it, the more that I realized how little I actually know and how utterly unsolved the crime actually is. It's a far cry from being cut and dry. Could that voice in my head have actually been onto something? Tonight, I'm going to take us on a journey through fact, likely scenarios, and maybe even have you questioning your own perception of what happened on the night of June 12th, 1994. Paul looks skeptical.
I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah. Before we dive into the fateful night, though, I think it's important that we learn a little bit about the victims and our prime suspect. I'm going to start with the victims because I feel like the grandiosity of the trial just overshadowed their remembrance and their legacy. I hope that after tonight, you'll at least walk away knowing a little more about these innocent people lost to us forever, and that you will always remember their names. Unfortunately, we don't know a whole lot about Nicole Brown Simpson's early life. We do know that she was born in Frankfurt, West Germany on May 19th, 1959, which I didn't know before this, but yeah, she's actually from West Germany. And she had a German mother and an American father. At this time, Germany was politically and physically divided into East and West, and the Berlin Wall would be erected just 2 years later. Living on the west side of Germany, Nicole's life would have been a relatively normal European life of the 1960s. Just before she started high school, Nicole and her family left Germany to move to Garden Grove, California, where she would begin high school at Rancho Alamitos High School. She graduated in 1976 and soon after began working at the Daisy, which is a nightclub inside the Beverly Hills Private Club. It was here that an 18-year-old Nicole would meet 30-year-old O.J. Simpson, who was still married to his first wife, Marguerite, who happened to be pregnant at the time. The two hit it off immediately. They started dating right away. And in 1979, O.J. divorced Marguerite and later married Nicole on February 2nd, 1985. They would go on to have 2 children together. Nicole was also stepmother to O.J.'s other 3 children. So they had Sydney and Justin. And from his first marriage, he had Arnell, Jason, and Aaron, who unfortunately passed away just before her 2nd birthday. Very tragic.
And then didn't he later have a baby with a Kardashian or something like that?
The Kardashian? Well, he is very wrapped up in the Kardashians. I don't think he had a baby with one, unless I...
Oh, I thought like Chloe ended up being his daughter or something like that.
What?
Maybe it was just...
Guys, somebody write this in the comments for me. This did not come up during my research.
I think when he was getting out of jail or at some point like a couple of years ago, they were doing a paternity test to see if Chloe might be her dad. And I was like, wouldn't this just be perfect? He gets out of jail, they start a new TV series, and he becomes like the most popular guy in America. He runs for president. I could just see it all happening. But
Oh my God.
hopefully that's not what happened.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah, I just, David was just saying that Paul needs more volume. I actually just brought it up on mine because I was telling Paul that before the show. Every time I do this, we check my background music and then it's super loud when we are streaming, at least in my ears. So I turned it down, but then it turns Paul down. So that's me. I fixed it.
How dare you put me down? A baby in the corner. Yeah, I shouldn't be talking anyway.
No. Oh, right. Okay. What? Kelsey says I read that too, Paul. Okay, we're going to have to... So Craig can fact check that for me. Anyways. As time went on, the honeymoon phase ended, and Nicole's life became entangled in a nightmarish web of abuse woven by O.J. Simpson. In 1 year, Nicole would call the police on O.J. at least 20 times. But it seemed as though the wheels of justice turned agonizingly slowly, with little more than a fleeting police visit here and there to show for her distress calls. Some have suggested that O.J.'s deep pockets and influential connections might have bestowed upon him a little bit of leniency within the system. He was known to throw lavish garden parties for those on the force, as well as fundraisers. And who knows? Of course, this has been just denied left and right by the LAPD. They said, no, that is never, that is not our policy. So I'm not saying it is, but it's just an important thing to know and consider that information is out there. However, in 1989, O.J. was arrested for spousal abuse. He made a nolo contendere plea, which basically means that you are pleading innocent, or you're saying that you're innocent, but it acknowledges that you would likely be found guilty based on the evidence available. Whew. I didn't even know that existed.
I didn't either. I'm shocked.
What?
I just learned something.
I know. So O.J. went so far as to accuse Nicole of being an abuser and referred to himself as a battered husband. Before the sentencing, allegedly, this whole story, just take it with a big allegedly. I'm in a blanket statement. Alleged. Allegedly, Nicole's parents convinced her to drop the charges against O.J. The reason for this? O.J. had given her father some lucrative investment options. So the couple reconciled and stayed together for another tumultuous 2 years before Nicole finally filed for divorce, February 25th, 1992. But, in a shocking twist, a few months after the divorce, Nicole and O.J. reconciled again, allegedly at the request of her parents, once more. This time, the reunion was fleeting as a wisp of smoke. Their love was as destructive as a wildfire, just consumed everything in its path. So in late 1993, Nicole finally moved out of O.J.'s place for good. The police had arrived to find O.J. in a rage and Nicole had a black eye. But once again, no charges were filed. She just left. Nicole decided to start her life anew, leaving behind all the haunting memories. Sadly, her life would be cut short less than a year after this. Next, let's take a look at our second victim, Ronald Lyle Goldman. We don't have a lot of background information on Ron because he was really overshadowed by Nicole Brown Simpson's murder, and he didn't have the fame that O.J. did. But some people didn't even remember who he was. So let me tell you some of the details that I've learned about his life. Ron Goldman was born July 2nd, 1968 in Chicago, Illinois, and grew up in the nearby community of Buffalo Grove. His family life changed when, in 1974, his parents divorced and his custody fell into question. He spent a brief time living with his mom, but ultimately he and his little sister were raised by his father, Frederick Goldman. Ron was brought up in the Jewish faith and attended Adlai E. Stevenson High School in Lincolnshire, Illinois. After graduation, he enrolled at Illinois State University, where he planned on majoring in psychology. He also worked as a camp counselor, and he volunteered to help children suffering with cerebral palsy. However, after a semester, his family moved to California, and Ron decided to leave Illinois State and move with them to the West Coast. He took advantage of the move to invest in and reinvent himself. He was resolved to discover who he was as an individual. So he took courses at Pierce College. He learned to surf, he played beach volleyball, he went rollerblading, he loved the nightclub scene. He was doing exactly what an 18-year-old should be doing, and he was just living his best life, supporting himself by obtaining work as an employment headhunter or tennis instructor. For a time, he was even a male model. Prior to his death, Ron obtained an emergency medical technician's license, but he never actually pursued the career. Instead, he told his friends that he was interested in opening up his own bar or restaurant in Brentwood. And he was going to call it Ankh after the Egyptian religious symbol for life, which he had tattooed on his shoulder. In order to achieve his dream, Ron took many jobs within the restaurant industry. And this is how he ended up as a waiter at the Mezzaluna Trattoria, where he met and befriended Nicole Brown Simpson. Despite popularly held beliefs, Ron and Nicole had a completely platonic relationship. Ron had been romantically involved with a woman named Jackie Bell for a solid 2-year stretch. Unfortunately, they broke up a mere 3 months prior to his death. Ron and Nicole were, however, really close friends. The two of them met just 6 weeks before the death when Ron borrowed Nicole's Ferrari. How nice is that?
Hey, buddy that I met at my waiting gig.
Yeah.
Can I borrow your Ferrari and no one will think there's anything going on? Great.
Yep. Another time he borrowed her car, he was taking a close friend out to lunch. So as he showed it off to his friend, like, who wouldn't, he insisted that they were just friends. He was not dating her, right? It's one of those things. If you had a girl with a Ferrari and you were dating her, you'd tell your friends for sure. But
yeah, that's true.
you'd be like, at least one, your close friend, you'd be like, yeah, check
But
it.
I don't know, maybe like guy girl dynamic. Like
It could be.
my girlfriend has a Ferrari and I'm a waiter.
True. Who knows? But Nicole would often dine at Mezzaluna, where Ron would often be her attentive waiter. As their friendship blossomed, they started to go out on coffee dates and leisurely lunches. On June 12th, 1994, Ron worked a bustling shift at Mezzaluna Trattoria when the phone rang. On the other end was Nicole Brown Simpson, who explained that her mother had left her sunglasses at the restaurant when they dined there earlier in the afternoon. After an exhaustive search, they found the glasses actually outside in the gutter. Nicole asked if Ron could bring them to the house later that evening, to which he agreed. Ron punched out at 9:33 p.m., but stayed at the bar for about 15 minutes as he drank water and he chatted with the bartender, savoring the final moments of an ordinary evening that was destined to turn sinister. Ron then made his way to his apartment, where he talked to his roommate. He made plans to meet the bartender of Mezzaluna at the local club after he dropped off the sunglasses to Nicole. And he then made a 10-minute walk to her condo on Bundy Drive. It's said that one's untimely death often occurs not because of a choice, but simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. A cruel twist that awaited Ron that evening.
What happened?
You'll have to see.
Oh.
And finally, we arrive at the center of this story. O.J. Simpson. O.J. was born in San Francisco, July 9th, 1947. His mother was Eunice Simpson, a hospital administrator, and his father was Jimmy Lee Simpson, a Federal Reserve Bank employee and a local drag queen. I had no idea about that fact.
Yeah, that's gotta make for some confusing conversations at the dinner table.
Right, and then like in 1940s and 50s, that would have been a big deal.
Sure.
I mean, it's a big deal today, but even bigger. Like we have so many conversations in our country right now about that very subject. In 1947, 50, It was unheard of. So at only 2 years old, OJ was diagnosed with a severe case of rickets. a skeletal disorder that results in the legs actually, like the bones weakening. It's due to a vitamin D deficiency. And once they start to weaken, they get very bow-legged. So the bottoms of the leg just bow out like that. So his mother actually made homemade braces that he wore until the age of 5. It was around this time in 1952 that his parents divorced, leaving Eunice to raise OJ and his siblings as a single mother. She struggled, but she always did her best to provide her children with what they needed. And OJ always had a beautiful and close relationship with his mother. However, OJ's relationship with his father remained strained for the rest of his life. OJ's adversities did not end there. He grew up in the Potrero Hill area of San Francisco, and he found himself drawn into the shadowy world of the street gang known as the Persian Warriors. Trouble seemed to be his constant companion, a turbulent relationship with the law punctuating his early years. Detentions and arrests became a routine for him, his footsteps echoing through the corridors of the San Francisco Youth Guidance Center on 3 separate occasions. Amid the unforgiving concrete of his confinement, fate made a serendipitous meeting happen, one that would forever change the trajectory of OJ's life. During his 3rd stint in the facility, the center set up a meeting between OJ and baseball legend Willie Mays. Mays became a catalyst for change, an inspirational force just urging OJ to rewrite the script of his life. And OJ decided from that moment onward, he would embark on a journey down the straight and narrow path, ready to defy the odds and carve out a legacy of his own. So thanks, Willie Mays. What a interesting connection.
Yeah. Legends.
Yeah. So OJ's journey started really ramping up after high school. He actually considered joining the army to fight during the Vietnam War, but quickly changed his mind when he heard about a close friend who had a wartime injury. Instead, he decided to enroll at City College of San Francisco and transferred to USC after that, where he quickly became a football sensation. In 1967 and 1968, OJ shattered national records for yards and touchdowns, earning him the prestigious Heisman Trophy. The Heisman win marked the birth of the iconic O.J. Simpson brand, setting the stage for his future triumphs and a media frenzy that would engulf his infamous murder trial. Notably, his Heisman victory held a record-breaking 51 years, a testament to his dominance on the football field.
I mean, he was all right.
Yeah. I mean, he just broke all kinds of records, and
It's not like he went to like one of the best football colleges in the country, USC or anything.
No.
Eventually.
no, it's just a little school. Yeah. So, OJ had. I was gonna skip that. After college, OJ was ready to go pro. He was in demand. Not only was he an excellent athlete, but he was also an actor who was starting to make a name for himself. So when the Buffalo Bills approached him to sign with their team, he demanded a really large sum of money. Wait for it. $650,000. Now, that does sound like a lot of money today, but don't forget this was 1969. In today's money, that would be, wait for it, $5,414,145.78.
A year?
Just for signing. That was just to get him on the team.
So,
Unbelievable.
side note, today, as we're recording this, the Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow just signed the biggest football contract in history so far. For the next 5 years, he will be making an average of $55 million a year.
Oh my goodness.
Which, I mean, it's not a signing bonus, but still, like,
Yeah, that's still, wow.
just think, like, even back then in today's money, it was like $5 million.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
still
now
a
that's-
lot,
And back then that was the biggest record, the biggest signing bonus.
Sure, and the NFL wasn't nearly what it is today,
right?
As far as a corporate conglomerate.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, that would be as I said, the largest contract in professional history at the time.
And he was on TV in movies.
Yeah.
Was it like
they were going
time
parallel?
He was in the Hertz commercials. He was in the Naked Gun movies.
Yes. Yeah, they were all. He was kind of going at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is why they gave in and gave him the contract. They didn't want to, and he was like, "Hey, I have an acting career. I can walk right now."
Right.
And so they gave in. Yeah. And actually, his first couple years with the Bills were kind of rough. But once he finally got his groove, he once again began smashing records left and right.
OJ got his groove back.
Yeah.
How OJ got his groove back.
The newest movie. Start writing it. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about all these records he broke because there's tons of them, but you can look them up if you're interested. They're really impressive, and they skyrocketed him to be one of the top NFL players of his time. They earned him an induction into the NFL Hall of Fame in 1985 and even secured him a place on the NFL 100th Anniversary All-Star team. His final game was December 16th, 1979. Now, his athletic prowess was undeniable. But it was actually his foray into acting that made him a household name. He had been an actor just as long as he'd been an athlete, but it was in 1974 while he was filming the movie The Klansman that a pivotal moment of revelation struck him. While everybody broke for lunch, he observed actors Lee Marvin and Richard Burton placing an order for chili from the famous Beverly Hills restaurant, Jason's. But it wasn't the prestige of the restaurant that caught his attention. It was the fact that they had their chili delivered by private jet. What a power move. The wealth of such gestures is just like that it symbolizes. Come on. So he became determined. He set his sights on Tinseltown as the stage where he would craft his future with the same charisma and flair that defined his athletic career. From there, he went on to make several movies, and he really did become quite well known in 1994. Now, I won't go in. He made a lot of movies that you probably recognize, especially, as you said, the Naked Gun movies. But in 1994, he landed a starring role in the action. It's a movie pilot. You know how they write like a movie as a pilot, like a TV movie, right? So it's like an hour and a half. And it's I don't want to say backdoor pilot, but it's a pilot for a show. And it was called Frogmen. Now, I'll forgive all you TV aficionados if you don't recognize that name, because it never actually aired. NBC had completed the pilot, and it was actually undecided about whether or not it would order the series. And when OJ was arrested for the murders of Nicole and Ron, NBC canceled the series and put the pilot in a vault, never to be seen again. So Frogmen was kind of an interesting concept. It was conceived as a thrilling dive into an action-packed world where former Navy SEALs, kind of like the A-Team, with Simpson as their leader, would go and have exciting new adventures every week. And in the movie, they were on a rescue mission. So it really put O.J. Simpson as like the next action hero, right? He was going to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was getting out there. This was his big break.
Which I might mention is also huge for like an African-American man in Hollywood at that time.
Yeah.
He was breaking barriers. He was about to break some barriers down.
Yeah. So this show actually is going to bring up a really interesting point later. So just tuck that little tidbit away for now. We'll come back to it. With all of this background information, let's finally move on to the night, June 12th, 1994. So as I mentioned earlier, somewhere around 10 o'clock, Ron Goldman walked over to the residence of Nicole Brown Simpson to return her mother's glasses. Eva Stein was a neighbor of Nicole's. She said that she fell asleep at about 10 and woke up 15 minutes later to the sound of incessant dog barking. She stated that she couldn't tell if it was one dog or multiple dogs, but it was just intense, more intense than anything she'd heard before, and it was making her really nervous. About 45 minutes later, her boyfriend, Louis Karpf, arrived home from an out-of-town trip, and the dog was still barking. So while he was settling down, he went out to go check the mail, and there, under the dim streetlights, he encountered an unexpected sight. A white dog just pacing restlessly up and down the street, barking, barking, barking. He realized as he looked at it, that's Nicole's white Akita. Now, just so you know, they were very set on these times. They said that these are the times that this happened. But in their initial statements, they both gave different times. Eva said that it happened sometime between 10:15 and 10:45. And Karp said that he came home between 10:50 and 11. But after that initial report, both were solidly saying it actually happened 10 to 10:15 is when it all started. Just, an interesting thing.
Sure.
Yeah. Another neighbor, Stephen Schwab, was nearing his home at 10:55 after walking his own dog. Every day, like clockwork, Stephen walks the same path, leaving at 10:30 and returning by 11, just in time to savor the comforting familiarity of the Mary Tyler Moore Show rerun that came on. On this particular night, he traveled the exact same route, and he encountered the white dog. So he knew what time it was when he saw the dog, even if he didn't have a watch. So he was walking his dog. He encountered the white Akita and noticed that its paws were smeared with a stain of blood. The Akita actually followed him home, where he gave it food and water, and he contemplated taking it to the shelter. Instead, he decided to put a leash on the dog to take it back to where he found it, hoping that it might lead him to its home. However, when they neared Bundy Drive, the dog pulled back, seemingly in fear, and just refused to walk any further. As the clock approached 11:40, the stage was set for yet another witness. Enter Schwab's neighbor, Boz Tepe. Upon his arrival home, he offered to keep the dog that Schwab had been walking. He said, "Yeah, I'll take care of him overnight, and it'll be fine. We'll figure it out in the morning." However, the animal's restlessness just proved to be too much. So that drove him and his wife to revisit the scene of the initial encounter. Bring him back. Finally, they got him back onto Bundy, and the dog just stopped right in front of Nicole Brown Simpson's house, refusing to walk any further. They looked around, and Boz Tepe saw the body of Nicole Brown Simpson just covered in blood. They called the police just after midnight. The first officer to arrive on the scene was Robert Risk at approximately 12:15. It's been about 2 hours. He found the two bodies on the walkway that led up to the house. He quickly determined that the children inside, Sydney and Justin, were unharmed. Mercifully, they were still asleep. He also noted that there was a bloody glove, a knit hat, and a bloody fingerprint on the gate. Risk then went inside the house to make a call to his commander to inform them about the murders. So he decided to use the kitchen phone.
Why didn't he just use his cell?
Yep. He has a radio, right? Like, you radio the stuff in. So
Yeah, that too.
yeah, because, So this could have obviously compromised the crime scene, ruined fingerprint samples on the phone, erased the last number called by the victim. Risk said that he considered using the radio instead of the phone, but decided not to because the media often scan police radios. I don't understand, but okay.
You don't understand?
I mean, I understand, but you'd rather contaminate the crime scene?
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
that's different. Well, it's probably two things. Like, one, he wanted to go in the house because like, it's the Simpson's house, right? But two, yeah. I mean, there's a lot. Just speaking because it's part of my world. Like, people listen to the police radio
100%.
to find scoops and stuff. So you find out a murder happened at a celebrity's house, there's gonna be a flock of news media there before even the cops get there. Yeah. So
it's true.
I kind of get that.
I do. But I'm just like, is that really better than contaminating the scene? I don't know, because I'm not a policeman. I'm not trained in any of that kind of stuff.
Today we would pull out our cell phone, which is like, I was like, why didn't you just use a cell?
Because it's 1995.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. About so. Anyways, let me reset. At about 2:15 a.m., 2 hours later, detectives Tom Lang, Mark Furman, and Philip Vanader arrived on the scene. They determined that Nicole had been stabbed 7 times, and her throat was slit so deeply that she was almost beheaded. They found defensive wounds on her wrist. Ron had been stabbed 24 times and suffered blunt force trauma. He also had defensive wounds, and both victims were pronounced dead at the scene. Soon, an officer identified a bloody footprint that was away from the bodies, and they believed that this footprint was from the perpetrator as he made his escape. They took measurements and pictures of the print and continued their investigations. Officer Vanader realized that he had been called to the house to investigate the abuse suffered by Nicole the previous year. His heart was heavy with this realization, and he informed the other officers that her ex-husband was O.J. Simpson. Upon hearing this, officers wasted no time and rushed to O.J.'s opulent Rockingham estate to deliver the fateful message. Detective Furman, a keen eye, couldn't help but notice a telling blood spatter on the white Bronco parked in front of the driveway. With growing concern, they rang the doorbell and delivered a resounding police knock. I don't know if anybody's heard that before. It's terrifying.
Pum, 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 pum.
Yeah, it's like the worst sound. But the resident was eerily silent. They started to think that O.J. Simpson could be a third murder victim, and this compelled them to actually breach the front door. But finding no one inside, they proceeded to the guest house, where they would find Cato Kalin, a friend of O.J.'s who was staying in his guest house. I can tell Paul's going to say something.
I didn't want to derail you.
It's okay.
Cato's a great guy.
Kalin told the officers that he hadn't seen OJ all day and he had no idea where he might be. As Vanader and Lang delved into questioning Kalin, Detective Furman seized a rare moment to explore the estate, boldly hopping over fences to do so. A move that would raise eyebrows in law enforcement circles, right? There's no warrant. There's not even technically a probable cause. There's maybe, but
it's tough if you think like maybe he's a murder victim and he's bleeding out somewhere. But yeah, you got to explain that in court, and so that's not something you just immediately want to do.
But during his rogue investigation, Furman unearthed another piece of evidence: a black bloodstained glove, unmistakably matching the left-hand glove found at Nicole's residence. However, the circumstances surrounding Furman's solo, warrantless exploration cast a shadow of suspicion on this, raising questions about the integrity of the evidence. Risk and reward.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the police called OJ in an attempt to locate him and inform him of Nicole's death. They found out that he was in Chicago, but he informed them that he would get a flight back to LA as soon as possible. But his reaction on hearing the tragic news raised a red flag. Instead of expressing concern for his children, who he knew were inside, or asking details about what happened, his immediate response was, "Who killed her?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
Not looking good. After the call, police started looking at the flight records, right? Because being in Chicago would be a pretty solid alibi. But the flight records told a different tale. They found out that OJ had actually taken a midnight flight. This could have left him enough time to commit the crime, return home, clean up, get to LAX, be on the plane. That is, of course, if the timeline is correct, because we've already had witnesses changing their timeline. So,
Yeah,
hard to say.
mean, and it would also explain not cleaning the blood off your car.
Yes. Yeah, it would. Even if he like kind of washed up a little bit, it's nighttime, you can miss it, you know, rushing out of there. Now, this leads us to June 17th, 1994, the day of the infamous white Bronco chase. OJ had been at the house of Robert Kardashian, who was a close friend and a lawyer. OJ had been charged with 2 counts of murder, and he was to surrender to the police. Finding it to be more than he could handle, OJ snuck out into the waiting Bronco with Al Cowlings, who was a close friend from high school and a former teammate, and also an OJ superfan. You should know this, though. I did not know this, that the white Bronco was not the only white Bronco. Al Cowlings owned an absolutely identical vehicle to OJ's. There were 2 white Broncos.
What?
I know. I was like, so are you sure the one in his driveway was his? Are you sure? Right? Oh, man. How? Like I said, stranger than fiction. Yeah. So it does start begging you to ask a lot of questions. About 103 million viewers watched the Bronco chase. There were 7 rival news helicopters flying over the freeway, and over 20 police cars followed as Al Cowling drove down Route 91 with OJ in the back seat, who had a gun to his own head. Philip Vanader, the lead detective, talked to OJ on the phone in an attempt to calm him down and turn himself in. OJ apologized profusely multiple times for just causing so much trouble and said that he just needed to talk to his mother. He explained that he had nothing to do with Nicole's murder and all he did was ever love her. He even said maybe I loved her too much. He claimed that he deserved to be hurt, nobody else, and that he had already said goodbye to his children. OJ then reportedly put the gun to his mouth, but Vanader was able to convince him to turn himself in. They agreed to let him go home and call his mother before being arrested, and he was allowed to stay on the phone for an hour. When they when they looked through the Bronco, they also, besides the gun, they found a passport as well as a fake mustache and beard and some spirit gum.
Spirit gum.
Yeah, gotta put the beard on. I know. Yikes.
So theatrical.
I know. I always find that unbelievable. I'm like, did you think that was gonna work? Like, maybe they were Al Cowlings. Maybe the beard was his. I don't know. Just seems weird.
Yeah.
So now we are on to the trial, which was massive, to say the least. Like I said, it lasted almost a year. And to talk fully about the trial would be an entire really long episode on its own. So while it's going to take a while, I'm going to cover like the key players and some of the bombshells. Now, the judge we'll start with was the highly experienced Lance Ito. He was also husband to Margaret York, the first female police officer to reach the rank of deputy chief in LA, which I think is pretty cool.
Female LA cops.
Yeah, many people seem to believe that he enjoyed having the cameras in the courtroom, and he was criticized for overusing the sidebar. But I think when you grasp just how big the teams were, how many lawyers were in the room, there's going to be a million sidebars. Also, Judge Ito was one of the only people to not write a book about the trial after it was done. I believe it was just Ito and Kardashian. Okay, the dream team. The dream team, OJ's lawyers. This was a huge collection of lawyers that were hired as his defense lawyers. They included the team's leader, Robert Shapiro. Now, it was widely believed that Shapiro is the reason that OJ was allowed to go home before being arrested, why he was allowed to stay on the phone with his mom for an hour. He was a good lawyer. And he believed that there was reasonable doubt, and this was the way that they were going to win the trial. Johnny Cochran was a former pastor and a lawyer, and he brought passionate arguments, especially regarding racial issues, to the forefront of the defense.
Chewbacca does not live on Endor.
Correct.
Do you know the Chewbacca defense?
No.
Oh, no. You have to look up the Chewbacca defense.
Okay.
After this episode, of
yes.
course. That does not make sense. All right.
Oh, man.
That's some homework for you.
Yes. Now I can't wait. I'm going to add it into the podcast later. Yeah. So yeah, he brought, like I said, he was very passionate, and he brought the racial issues to the forefront. Robert Kardashian. Now, he was a commercial lawyer. He was not a criminal attorney. And he was also a close friend of both OJ and Nicole. Despite his lack of experience, Robert Shapiro brought on him into the mix. Now, some say this was an absolutely brilliant move, because once he was on the team, he could not be called to testify about OJ and Nicole's relationship. And this is what really launched the Kardashians into the fame that they have now.
Oh man, if only OJ didn't murder those two people, we wouldn't have to be dealing with the Kardashians ever. Yeesh. Man,
actions have consequences.
Yes. If I couldn't be more angry with him than I already was, I already am.
The next lawyer was F. Lee Bailey. He was a criminal lawyer who was responsible for questioning police work. Barry Scheck, a forensics expert, was brought on at the same time as lawyer Peter Newfield. Gerald F. Ullman came from Johnny Cochran's law office and mostly did behind the scenes work. Like, you wouldn't really have known his name back then. But
his name was Jerry F. Ullman?
Yeah.
Jerry F. Ullman.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, that was his name. And he actually wrote the famous line, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit," and gave it over to Cochran.
That does not make sense.
Yes. And interestingly, Alan Dershowitz was originally supposed to be on the prosecution team, but decided to move over to the defense. Yeah. So those were all of his lawyers. That's a lot. The prosecution team had 2 lawyers. So the prosecution team was Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden. Marcia Clark was a 16-year veteran prosecutor. At the time of the trial, she was going through a very messy divorce, which would actually become the media's main focus of her, rather than anything that she presented in court. This was compounded when she had to cancel a court date due to childcare issues. And the media seemed to care more about her appearance and fashion choices than, once again, anything she said in court. She brought Christopher Darden onto the case, which is something I imagine that she regrets to this day. Christopher Darden was actually employed by the Special Investigation Division in the LA Prosecutor's Office. He didn't have much in the way of criminal law experience. After the case, he was ostracized by the Black community at large because race was such a heavy topic, which we'll get into with him. And after the case, Darden said that he left the SID, but several witnesses say that he was fired due to an inappropriate relationship he had with Clark. Today, he appears as a commentator on several TV networks and has written several books. Okay, so here we go. The prosecution honed in on their formidable evidence, leaving no room for doubt. They started with O.J. Simpson's history of abuse towards Nicole, and that was just a spotlight right from the beginning. And they actually played some of the 911 phone calls. They had 911 operator Sharon Gilbert explain and legitimize one of the calls. Because the thing is that when you do these things in a trial, you can't just say, like, here's a 911 call and play it. You have to have somebody on the stand that's going to talk about this thing. So you can't just introduce the evidence. There has to be reasons, and people have a reason to bring it in with their testimony. It's very complicated. So they brought her on because she had been on some of the calls. The defense questioned the lack of visual evidence. They said, but Sharon, we can't see what's going on. And Sharon just said, well, you can hear the hits. OJ, however, clung to the narrative that he was a victim of the abuse by Nicole. They also presented DNA evidence. This was very new in 1995, but they had a lot of DNA evidence that showed the pool of blood by Nicole's house was a mixture of Ron, Nicole, and OJ's blood. They also found OJ's blood in a trail leading from the house, and OJ's DNA on the knit hat and bloody footprints in OJ's Bronco. And the shoe prints even matched the size and brand of a shoe that OJ had previously worn. Yep. The defense mostly focused on racial issues and police bias to create reasonable doubt. For instance, Johnny Cochran brought up the witness, Marianne Gurkis, who testified that on the night of the murder, she tried to talk to the police. She said, I heard things, I saw things here, I want to talk to you. And they looked at her and said, we got this wrapped up. What? No. Unbelievable. Now, despite that, the prosecution started off really strong. Really strong. You see that they have tons of evidence. It's indisputable. They started to build their timeline for the jury to consider. Cato Kalin officially testified. He said, here's OJ's typical schedule. Here's what I knew of the day. And he also repeated that he had not seen OJ that day. He can't testify on that. But things changed once they called limo driver Alan Park to the stand. Park was hired to take OJ to LAX for his flight to Chicago. When he pulled up to the Rockingham house at 10:25, he noted that there was no white Bronco out front. OJ didn't appear to be home. And just before 11, Park claimed that he saw a shadowy figure dressed all in black climb over a wall, slink across the grass, and go through the front door into the house. Shortly after this occurrence, OJ exited the house and met Park and claimed that he had overslept. He had taken a nap and didn't wake up.
Hey, dude, I'm sorry to tell you this, but somebody just, went into your house.
Right?
You should probably call the cops or something. You didn't see him? He came right in. Oh, wow.
Also, that is a good point. Did he not say anything? I never thought about that before. Did he not tell OJ, did somebody just go in your house? That's really creepy. I would want to know.
As someone who's a service provider.
Yeah.
Just okay, let's just get you to the.
I guess. I'd have been like, are you okay?
Somebody just went. I just gotta say, somebody just snuck over the wall and went in your house.
I know.
Just throwing it out there.
Park also said that Simpson carried a small bag that he wouldn't let him handle. The prosecution insinuated that it could have concealed the murder weapon. This cast a shadow of suspicion on OJ. The defense attacked the validity of Park's statement. They even said, you couldn't identify the figure. How do you know who it was? How do you know that was OJ? It was dark. He just insisted that it was well lit enough. After Park's testimony, seeing a great opportunity, the prosecution recalled Kato Kalin, who then testified that he and OJ went out at about 9:30 for a Big Mac and French fries, contradicting his earlier statement. Through Kalin, the prosecution introduced phone records that showed OJ had actually called his girlfriend, Paula Barbieri, at 10:03 from his car. Well, he had a car phone. So. Yeah.
That's like the first mobile phone.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
those like
literally
they're like this
automobile.
big. And again, it's going great for the prosecution. It seemed like they had a slam dunk. But things started to fall apart quickly when they started discussing the DNA evidence. Because again, in the 90s, all this DNA testing was really new. General public didn't really understand what it was and how it worked. So the prosecution called criminologist Dennis Fung to the stand to explain the findings to the jury. However, Fung couldn't explain it in a relatable way. He just rattled off numbers and figures without explanations or like, this is what this means. Nothing. He just said the numbers. Many jurors actually started drifting off. It was hot. Seeing an opportunity, Sheck, the defense forensic expert, cross-examined him. He grilled him about dates, methods of collection. He knew that Fung was going to have to think really carefully about all of this. The line of questioning actually revealed that some of the DNA samples were collected 3 weeks after the murders. That's a long time. Sheck even presented the bloody sock found in OJ's house and asked Fung to point out the bloodstain on this sock. And Fung said, well, I can't see one. But he failed to explain that DNA can be extracted from a microscopic sample. So the jury just went, well, there's no blood on that sock. How could they get DNA? Right? No, didn't explain it. So they kept going. It's just amazing. The questioning culminated again in Sheck asking Fung where was he when the samples were collected? And he replied, the crime scene. And Sheck just appeared shocked. Not in the lab? And there were audible gasps from the jury. This was totally normal. Totally acceptable procedure. You can get your samples from the crime scene. But Fung was so flustered at this point, he didn't even dispute Sheck. He just took it. So he was dismissed. He stood up from the stand. I kick it over this. Walked over to the prosecution, shook each lawyer's hand, and hugged them. Then he did the same for the defense lawyers.
He's very confused.
He is.
He's not quite sure what's happening here.
He was never going to do that again.
Oof.
Yeah. I know. Rough.
Oh, fun.
The prosecution brought another expert on to explain the DNA evidence to try and fix what had just happened, but it was pretty much done. He told them in numbers, like he said, here are the odds that it's not OJ, and it's like 1 in billions. But it was just too late. They were already convinced that this was hooey. So the damage was done. Hoping to get back on the right footing, the defense called up Detective Furman, who found the second glove and sock at OJ's house. Furman verified the location of each piece of evidence he had collected and said that protocol had been followed. He also stated clearly that the LAPD did not immediately make up their mind about OJ's guilt and that there was no bias in this case at all. He also claimed that he had had suspicions regarding OJ's guilt because he had previously been assigned to OJ's abuse case. So that kind of sounds like some bias to me. Just, okay. F. Lee Bailey came on and asked Furman if he had ever used the N-word before. Furman said no, he had not ever used that word. And Bailey sat down, a little grin on his face. He was dismissed after that. Beginning to worry about the case, Darden went to Clark and said, "We have to do something drastic. We need to grab the jury's attention." He had an idea. He told Clark that they should have OJ put on the gloves so that the jury could see him. He believed that it would turn the tables and that would win them the case. And Clark said, "No, absolutely not. We are not doing that." The next day, it was particularly warm in the courtroom, and it was yet another grueling session of technical evidence painstakingly presented by the prosecution. And once again, the members of the jury were falling asleep in their chairs. Judge Ito called for a recess so that everybody could wake up. And Robert Shapiro noticed that the glove was just sitting out there unsealed. Testing had already been done, so it didn't need to be, perfectly preserved anymore. So he actually took the opportunity to go over and try on the glove himself. They didn't fit his hands. So knowing that O.J. Simpson's hands were even bigger than his, he realized that he had the case-winning piece of evidence right there.
Wow.
Yeah. So actually, Shapiro approached Darden and he started taunting him. And he said, "You really should have OJ try on those gloves. If you don't, maybe I will." Thinking, okay, he's trying to steal the spotlight again. Darden fell for it. He had OJ try on the gloves, and guess what? They were too small. Darden was flabbergasted, and he accused OJ, saying he's just acting. This guy's an actor. And he went so far as to start walking over like he was going to grab the gloves and pull them down on OJ's hands. But he thought better. He told Judge Ito, "Please force him to put on those gloves correctly." But we all know that glove did not move an inch. It just didn't fit. Yeah.
Wookiees do not live on Endor.
They do not.
But wasn't there also a thing about moisture and the
Yes.
gloves drying out?
So the gloves had been frozen and unfrozen a few times. So it's possible that the gloves had shrunk. There is also another possibility that some of OJ's medications could have swollen his hands, which I'll talk a little bit about too. Medications and medical conditions. So that is also a possibility. But it's impossible to say why they didn't fit.
It's impossible to prove.
Yes, exactly. Like, were they just too small? Had they shrunk? Had OJ's hands swollen up? We don't know. After this, a defense called OJ's daughter, Arnell, to the stand, who said that her father was distraught over Nicole's death. This was backed up by testimony from OJ's mother and sister. Arnell also refuted earlier testimony from a friend of OJ's, Ship, who claimed to be with OJ the day that he heard about Nicole's murder, and said that OJ was cold, and even had told Ship that he wished that something like this had happened to Nicole. He also said, Arnell said that Ship was actually very, very drunk that day, and there was no way he could assess or even remember the situation clearly in that condition. She also claimed to see him alone in the hot tub with Nicole shortly before her death, calling his motives into question. She even alleged that Nicole was on really good terms with OJ leading up to her death, saying that Nicole visited frequently, she was very friendly, and she often even sat in OJ's lap. Next up, in the near wins but terrible misses category for the prosecution, Robert Heistra, who is another one of Nicole's neighbor, came up to testify. The defense asked him if he had heard anything out of the ordinary on the night of the 12th. Heisha said that he heard two men loudly arguing at 10:40, an unusual occurrence in this wealthy, quiet neighborhood. And eventually the man Heisha called the second man yelled, and then a gate slammed with force. After this, Nicole's dog began barking incessantly. This corroborated the timeline that OJ could have committed the murders, fled the scene, and still made it to his Rockingham house in time for the limo ride. Again, would have had to have been very fast, but still could happen. But on cross-examination the next day, Darden, who I don't think I mentioned earlier is a black man, asked, of those two voices, did one of them sound black? Cochran, just who was also black, in case you've never seen any of it, just exploded. You can't tell somebody's voice. You can't tell by their voice that they're black. Cochran accused Darden's statement and sentiment of being racist. Instead of a carefully crafted response or even just silence, Darden chose to respond. If the statement is racist, then he, pointing to Heistra, is the racist. What? That doesn't even make any sense.
I thought lawyers are supposed to be intelligent.
Right? Oh my God. That's what I'm saying. Clark probably, I just regrets bringing this guy on. She can't not. Yeah. Now the outbursts continued and they grew in intensity, and eventually a recess was called. When Heistra was brought back to the stand, he just said, I don't know what a black person's voice would sound like. Following this, he claimed that he saw a white truck, which could have been a Bronco, leave Nicole's house and head south. However, OJ's house was north. So once again, leaving some of the facts in doubt. The prosecution seemed to be in quicksand. The more that they tried to get their footing, the further they sank. Now, with this mess of a prosecution case, the defense was eager to just ride this wave, let the case be won for them. But they did bring up the fact that they claim that OJ could not have committed these murders. It was not possible because he had been diagnosed with a severe case of arthritis. He had arthritis in his hands, his elbows, that affected his arms. This would mean that there's just no way he could have stabbed anybody, let alone two young and healthy victims that could fight back. This was even backed up by a doctor who showed a diagnosis as well as his prescriptions. However, the prosecution aired a fitness video that OJ had recorded a mere 3 weeks before the murders, showing him lifting heavy objects and jumping around. The pièce de résistance. When he lunged toward the camera, making a stabbing motion, and he said, "This one is good with the wife."
What?
Yeah. Now, I'll concede. It is an entirely different situation. Like when you move through the movements, like if you do this, a stabbing motion, compared to having actual force behind it. It's very different. I can understand how you would be able to physically stab the air, but not have the force and the strength to do it on a person.
But why would you say this?
Why would you say that? Ugh. Oh. This is not a good look.
It still wasn't enough to sink him.
Nope, it was not.
Spoiler alert. Sorry.
So the prosecution also brought up the Frogman pilot. Remember that? Here's the payoff. I mentioned that OJ played the leader of a band of former Navy SEALs going on a rescue mission. Well, guess what he was trained in? Hand-to-hand combat with knives, which is probably where that video stemmed from. And it's odd because he never even used a knife in the show. Don't know why they did it. Who knows? Maybe it was just like a good
character study.
Yeah, exactly. Background information, something for him to know. I don't know.
Hey, OJ, for the next week, we're going to train you to use knives, but it's not in the script where you'll ever use knives. It's just so you know it.
Yeah. Weird. The prosecution argued, yeah, he had strength. He had know-how. He could have committed these murders. Another disconcerting revelation cast a shadow over the OJ case. The presence of unexplained wounds on OJ's hands. Now, OJ claimed that when he found out that Nicole had been murdered, he actually slammed a glass on the counter of his hotel room and cut his hand. The hotel staff did find the shattered glass. They said they did not find blood, but they found the shattered glass. But a flight attendant came forward and said that they had actually spotted cuts on OJ's hand during his flight to Chicago. Now, I both like and dislike this because it's really interesting that the flight attendant testified to this, but it would have been several months later. And I mean, even just remembering one thing for a few days, right, in this job where you see so many people, right, and then testifying about it months later, I have a hard time imagining that there was no bias. And if they're like, there were cuts on OJ's hand, and you're like, I saw him that night. I think he did have cuts on his hand. It's just not reliable for me. Right?
I think if there's someone who's a celebrity that you recognize and you notice something, I could see you remembering that.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's just also fallible.
I'm an actor, so I've worked waiter jobs, waiting jobs. And I can remember very specifically waiting on celebrities and what they were wearing, and I don't know. I could see that.
Yeah. Now again, I'm not saying it's impossible. Totally could have happened, but it's also again not provable, which is rough. So that's why I like it, because I think totally. But at the same time, it's hard to take it as fact.
Anytime you're talking true crime and trials and
exactly.
Stuff, it's proving. What can you prove?
Exactly.
Yes.
That's the hard thing. We can get so much good circumstantial evidence. It's hard to prove it. But it's my opinion that the next two people called to the stand sealed the deal for the not guilty verdict in this case. Spoilers. First up, Mark Fuhrman called back for a second round of questioning. Remember that grin? Let's turn the clock back 10 years. Screenwriter Laura Hart McKinney was making a documentary about the LAPD. She asked Mark Fuhrman for an interview, and she brought up the issue of race. And Fuhrman freely admits that there is a policy within the LAPD to not only brutalize black suspects, but they would also plant evidence on them. Oh dear. Not only that, but he would go on to use the N-word an egregious 42 times. To make matters worse, he also admitted that he was opposed to women being in the LAPD. Why, you ask? It's because of his supervisor, Peggy York. Does that name start to ring a bell? If you didn't know, Peggy is a nickname for Margaret. And Margaret York was the wife of Judge freaking Ito. What the what? Unbelievable. Like I said, as I keep saying, stranger than fiction.
A lot of stars had to align.
I know. Now, again, we talked about this a little bit before, but maybe you don't realize this kind of evidence is always reviewed before it's presented to a judge and jury. And obviously, this would be a conflict of interest for Judge Ito were he to watch this interview. Of course, the defense wanted the jury to watch this because it showed that he planted evidence, right? That he was a racist, that he, again, he was okay with brutalizing, he was okay with tampering with evidence, planting it. The jury has to see this, okay? Again, the prosecution's like, no way. It has no relevance to this case. It was 10 years ago. Not only that, but he actually, at some point, realized that he had this racial bias. I don't know the means by which that happened, but he went to counseling. Okay. Don't know if he was, reported. Don't know if he just one day was like, this isn't okay. But whatever happened, he went to counseling over this.
I mean, and it doesn't help anything, but still, like, when you're on the stand and somebody asks you, have you ever used the N-word before?
Yes. And you say no.
Like, how do you forget? Oh, yeah.
That interview.
I used to have a racial bias.
Yeah.
And just like, no, never in my life.
No way. I know.
Wow.
I know. So, yeah, it wasn't looking good for Mr. Furman over there. Yeah, so once they realized that Judge Ito was going to somehow either read this or see the tapes, they asked for a redacted transcript to be read by Ito first before presenting it to the jury. In the end, Judge Ito was given a full transcript, but not allowed to watch the video of the interview, and that was going to keep him neutral. I don't see how, but okay. Surprisingly, he ruled that most of the comments on the tape actually weren't relevant to the case. They were same thing as the prosecutor saying. They're old. They're 10 years old. There's nothing directly relating to this case, which I still say, hello, like planting evidence on black suspect is related to this case, but okay. And
he went to counseling.
Yeah,
he doesn't do that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I was shocked to hear that, but okay. However, the jury was allowed to hear a few lines. A few things that he said. We have no N-words where I grew up. They played that. There's another line saying the female police officers, don't do anything. They don't go out there to initiate contact with a 6'5" N-word who's been in prison for 7 years pumping weights. Now, the CNN reports and the New York Times both say that the second line was not that one about females. It was actually McKinney saying, why do they live in that area? And Furman says that's where the N-words live. So it's two of those three lines. But that's all the jury was allowed to hear. To me, this is all just, it's unbelievable. And that's not even the end of it for Furman. During the questioning, he was asked, did you plant evidence in this case? His response, I plead the fifth. Dude! Like, he later said that his union-appointed lawyer told him to plead the fifth to all questions from there on out, because he would soon be facing his own trial for perjury. But apparently they didn't explain that sometimes you just need to answer with no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like right then. Right then is when you need to answer with no.
No. Gosh. Yeah. And then Judge Ito, right, who said the interview is not suitable for the court, did allow Furman's video interview to be distributed to the media, putting a nail in the coffin of Furman's career. Retribution or no? You tell me.
Yeah, that's retaliation to Max. For
Yeah.
crap about his
We're
wife.
not listening to it in court, but everybody's going to listen to this. Yikes.
And I mean, I'm happy that it was the end of his career, but
yeah, it's just,
wow.
There's no coming back. And last but not least, defense forensics expert Henry Lee took the stand. He was brought in by the defense, and he was a really great public speaker. He had really good charisma, and he quickly formed like a nice bond with the jury right away. And he testified simply that he had doubts about the prosecution's DNA evidence and their collection methods. He didn't go into detail about why, but he was very convincing, and he spoke so that every jury member could understand and relate. He also said that he didn't believe that the shoe print or the fingerprint was actually OJ's. And as I understand it, okay, I wasn't there, there was no actual technical evidence presented, just the words and from a likable, knowledgeable expert in his field. And the jury believed
not
him.
all over the place and confusing.
Exactly.
They believe it.
He just said
Yeah.
no. Okay, so I think we all know the rest of the story. There were passionate closing arguments. The defense and the prosecution rested their cases. All that was left to do was wait. The teams of lawyers had made their vacation plans, and everyone expected the jury to debate for weeks or even months after this nearly year-long case. But in reality, it took 2.5 hours, and the jury found O.J. Simpson not guilty. Now, that was a whole lot of evidence, a whole lot of information, and I almost can't believe that we got through it. Like, I have expected for Paul to say, let's take a recess and reconvene tomorrow. But I am interested to see what our audience thinks at this point. Like, and I don't want you to think about all the things you know now or O.J. Simpson as a celebrity, anything like that. Like, can you strip away your bias at this point, because it's so ingrained in all of us? Like, if you were a jury in 1995 and you heard all of this evidence, what would you have done? Right? You have these conflicting witnesses, a lead detective who is a racist and admits to planting evidence, even though they didn't see that part, but we know that. A DNA expert saying that the evidence isn't what the prosecution led you to believe. Ugh, in a 1995 world, I don't know.
I think the thing is, like, it's the whole without a shadow of a doubt thing.
Yeah.
Guilty or not guilty, like, you have to be you have to think, if you're in a jury, you have to think somebody is guilty without a shadow of a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what, and if everybody's made it this far through the podcast, I would suggest ESPN made a fantastic documentary about this whole thing called OJ Made in America.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched the whole thing.
Ooh.
And it is fascinating.
Yeah.
At the end, they talk to jurors.
Mm-hmm.
And for some of them, it was the whole without beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't say, yes, it was him. But now, you know, when they made the documentary, however long, many years ago it was, they had all turned and been like, it was him. It was so obviously him. But then they talked to like 2 or 3 jurors that are just like, no evidence could ever convince me that OJ did it. And it's just like, it is wild. It is a crazy phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. So yeah, like, if you're in our live chat, I would love to see what you think, if you can handle it. Because I know some people, like, they can't get past it. You have your mindset, just like you said. Your mind is set in whichever way, and like, no, there's going to be no way to convince you one way or the other. I think if this murder and investigation were done today, I think it would be very different. Like, we understand and have really solid, like, DNA understanding and everything. I think it's a product of the time and the celebrity. I think we would have a lot more definitive answers. But let me throw what
Dave Hill in the chat says, I understand that OJ is still trying to solve the case.
Yeah, I mean,
when he was acquitted, he said, I'm going to dedicate every waking moment for the rest of my life to finding whoever did this.
Oh, that went well. Sarcasm. So yeah, there's a couple monkey wrenches I'm going to throw at you right now. The first, in 2017, OJ released a book called If I Did It. And the best part, it was ghostwritten, but the best part of this is that the title, the word if is like small, right? It says, I did it, right? Like, first of all, what?
He's already been acquitted. He can't get charged again.
Yeah. So basically, in this book, OJ discusses a theory, among a lot of other things. It wasn't actually brought up in court, but I'm sure it was in everybody's mind, because if it's in my mind as I'm perusing this evidence, it's definitely in Johnny Cochran's mind. And it basically says, like, if I did it, here's how it would have gone. I know. So OJ explains that if he had done it, he probably would have had an accomplice. And he calls this accomplice Charlie, right? Just for the purposes of the book. And some say Charlie's made up. Others say it's Al Cowling. I actually kind of have another explanation for this, which again, I'll get to that a little later. OJ says in the book, again, this is all if I had done it. On the night of June 12th, an unnamed friend informed him, ooh, hold on. Let me get my music back. I hit the hour 22 mark. Here we go. So OJ says, on the night of June 12th, an unnamed friend informed him that Nicole had returned to her old life of drugs and clubbing. OJ called Charlie and asked him to come over to his house. When Charlie arrived, he said that the rumors that he had heard were true. Charlie blamed Nicole's friend, Faye Resnick. Now, Faye Resnick was a good friend of Nicole's, and right after Nicole's death, she would sell her own book detailing the seedier parts of Nicole's life. She said that she had done this on the advice of a psychic because that's what Nicole would have wanted. Not for the, millions of dollars. OJ told Charlie to get the white Bronco and take him to Nicole's so he could read her the riot act. When he arrived at her Bundy Drive apartment, he observed Nicole getting candles and playing music. He assumed that she was getting ready for a date. And as a side note, some of the details in this were confirmed, but they weren't released until after the book came out. OJ said that he was surprised when Ron came through the back gate, and he explained that he was only there to return Nicole's mother's glasses. However, when Nicole came outside, her dog greeted Ron really friendly, right? Just came up, wagging the tail, whole thing. And so OJ concluded that Ron was no stranger, but Nicole's new boyfriend. This led to an argument, and Ron, being trained in martial arts, did some defensive moves to protect himself and Nicole. And after this, the book says that OJ would come to after blacking out, holding a knife and just soaked in blood. He purports that he would have given his clothes to Charlie, but not his socks, as they didn't appear to have any bloodstains on them. Charlie would have disposed of them and the weapons, and OJ would go back home, explain to the limo driver that he'd overslept. So that's what OJ said would have happened if he did it.
That sounds like a confession.
Right. And that's what a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists have said. Like, this is a narcissist who is putting his story out there. Don't know. It's definitely a weird move. Yeah. Now, go ahead.
If you're innocent, why would you do this?
Exactly. I mean, it's possible he was having money issues, because he had, I'm trying to remember, because I didn't write this down in the notes, but he was arrested, right, in Vegas for stealing.
Yeah, for being a criminal.
Yeah, for theft and kidnapping. It was a whole ordeal. Went back to jail, got released. But this actually is interesting because the family, the Goldmans, actually sued OJ. OJ was found guilty in civil court, being liable for the murders. Now, being prosecuted there is very different than in a criminal law. You don't need the shadow of a doubt. It's very different. And they sued him for over $30 million, but they have not seen very much of that money. OJ moved to Florida, which actually has laws to protect people in that situation, so you don't lose all your money.
Right.
And so one thing that's interesting, if you want to read this book, the profits actually go to the Goldman family. They don't go to OJ. So they won the rights to that.
But that's interesting too, because the civil case, as I understand it, they found OJ to be liable for Ron's death.
Yes. I know. That actually happens often. Somebody loses the case in a criminal court, and then they go to the civil trial and they win. It's weird. Like I said, because the rules for finding somebody guilty is very different. Yeah. Oh, that's weird. Yeah. So now, here's the thing. I have because I had that voice in my head when I was little, I've always had that kind of desire for OJ to actually not have done it. Right? I'm like, If only there was something that could tell me, right? He didn't do it. That would be so nice.
What is it?
Right? Now, I actually came across this theory and I love it. It's not that he's innocent, but here is this theory that I love. The theory is that OJ's son, Jason Simpson, is actually the murderer. And I'm going to give you 10 reasons why. So,
10?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. He was one of the kids that was in the house?
No. He's one of OJ's the children of his first wife.
Okay.
I know it's weird because there's Jason and Justin.
Yeah.
Jason is his oldest son. Now, Jason had been arrested 4 times prior to the murder. And these included like DUI, driving with a suspended license, and assault with a deadly weapon. Okay. Reason number 1. Go ahead.
How old was he when this happened?
Let's see. I'd have to look it up for sure, but I believe he was in his 20s, but I'd have to look at it again because I'm not 100% sure. It might have said in this paragraph there in these 10 reasons, but I'll look.
Sorry, I'll stop interrupting.
No, it's fine. Interrupt because we can always see if Craig can look that up. Now, reason number 1. Jason had violently attacked a girlfriend with a knife, almost killing her, and had assaulted another girlfriend, almost breaking her back when he threw her into a bathtub. In the years leading up to Nicole's death, it seemed like Jason's violent tendencies were escalating. At the time of the murder, he was on probation for attacking his boss with a kitchen knife. While OJ had been charged with counts of domestic violence, he was not known to use weapons in his attack. In fact, a former coach of OJ said in an interview that OJ was extremely squeamish at the sight of blood and he could not handle it at all. A bloody stabbing would be an odd choice, but a pattern for Jason. 2. Jason had been medically diagnosed with intermittent rage disorder, also called Jekyll and Hyde syndrome. This disorder would make him prone to angry and brutal outbursts. Jason Simpson had a pattern of blacking out and even had been committed to a hospital multiple times because he was hearing voices in his head. He was prescribed Depakote, or I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but he had a prescription to help him with his anger issues as well as seizures that he had been experiencing. But he stopped taking his medication months before the murder. Jason's diaries, which you can see pictures of, they actually revealed that he would talk about himself in 3 different voices and personalities in his journals. He even wrote about killing and talked about, like, I know I'm a good guy, but I can't find him. I know what I need to do. So there was a lot going on in his journals. Reason number 4. A knit black hat, right, called a navy watch cap, was found at the crime scene that didn't match any fibers of OJ's hats. Like, there was nothing. OJ never owned those hats. He's never been pictured in one. It's kind of weird. He wore his normal shoes, but for some reason he bought a hat. There's pictures of Jason Simpson in an identical hat. Now, the hat did have some of OJ's hair in it, but isn't it equally possible that, like, OJ tried it on? OJ hugged his son, right? You can easily get your hairs onto your kids' clothes. Paul, how much of your DNA do you think are on your kids' clothes?
A ton of it.
Right? So
we use the same washing machine.
Yeah, exactly. So as far as the DNA being on the hat, it's entirely possible. And the hat also contained dog hairs, which OJ didn't own a dog, but you know who did? Jason Simpson.
Stepmom.
And his stepmom.
Actual mom.
No, that's his stepmom, because it's his first. Maybe his actual mom had one too. But remember, this is not Nicole's son. This is Marguerite's son.
Right, so his actual mom had a dog.
I don't know if she had a dog.
Oh.
Nicole had her Akita.
Well, yeah.
But yeah. But his mom might have too. I don't know.
He's
but
not hanging
Jason Simpson did have a dog.
Okay.
The LAPD, number 5. I keep forgetting to name these. Number these. LAPD found 15 unknown fingerprints at Nicole's home, and not one of those matched OJ's. So there were 15 unexplained fingerprints. They would go around and be like, these are fresh fingerprints. And they did not belong to OJ. They did not belong to Ron. They did not belong to Nicole. They were just there. And they never compared them to Jason's prints. They never asked him. In fact, they didn't even interview Jason. They also found blood and skin under Nicole's fingernails that did not match OJ's DNA. And once again, they were not compared to Jason Simpson's or really anybody's. Number 6. Ron Goldman was a 3rd-degree black belt. You remember from the story? If I did it, he was trained in martial arts very well. He had bruises on his hands, which suggests that he fought back against the assailant. And during the interrogation after the murders, OJ was strip searched. They investigated like his whole body and they found not one bruise. And I don't know about you, but I still have hints of bruises I got at my show weeks ago. Right? They don't just disappear in a day. If he was bruised, they would have found something, right? Why?
I Googled it. It says he was 24 at the time and on probation for assault with a deadly weapon for attacking his boss with a knife.
Yeah. Yikes. Yeah. So, number 7. A freaking knife was found in Jason's locker at work. An investigator working on this case, or on the theory, purchased the contents of his storage locker at work. And they found that it contained a knife, and this knife did match the description of the murder weapon. Come on. The Swiss and stiletto knives that were owned by OJ were ruled out as possible murder weapons, but a forensic scientist concluded that the butt of Jason's knife did match an injury that Nicole suffered on the top of her head. Weird. Yeah. Number 8. Jason Simpson attended the Army and Navy Academy and even had been trained in hand-to-hand combat, including knife training. OJ, on the other hand, was again known to hate the sight of blood. So he had the history, the training, the possible weapon, the rage issues. And Jason had no actual alibi. Now, he claimed to be alone the whole day pretty much and then went to work. However, his time card was handwritten. They used an electronic punch machine. So you can see like the other ones are all punched in. And then on that night, it's just handwritten. This is like, I forget, this is like 9:55. Even though it was working that night. So, yeah. Very suspicious. And finally, number 10. 4 days before his own arrest, OJ hired top-notch attorney Carl Jones to represent not himself, but Jason. Now, this would make sense, except that Jason hadn't even been interviewed by the police. He wasn't a suspect in the murders. So what would possess OJ to hire one of the top criminal attorneys for his son if he wasn't even interviewed? Why would he do this? I don't know.
You're blowing my mind right now.
I know.
You're flipping everything I knew about this case on its head.
I told you. Now, I think that OJ was there at the crime scene that night. I really do. I think that I should say, I obviously don't know what happened. Okay, I'm not saying this is what happened, but I really think that Jason Simpson flew into a rage. It could have been over a perceived slight, but he murdered Nicole and Ron. It makes sense that a young, fit, agile man could take down 2 healthy adults rather than OJ, who was significantly older than Ron and Nicole. Right, it's starting to click. Perhaps OJ stood and watched, horrified and paralyzed at the pools of blood collecting at the ground. Or maybe Jason called his father for help once it happened. But one way or another, OJ walked through that crime scene got his son out of his bloody clothes. Maybe he handled that hat, showed Jason how to get out of there without being seen, and then exited in his white Bronco, leaving a trail of bloody footprints. OJ, shocked by what he had seen, drove off in the wrong direction. My friends, this is it. This is where we have to bring our exploration of the O.J. Simpson trial to a close. We're left with lingering intrigue, mystery, and questions that just can't be answered. We've delved deep into this topic, and we put ourselves in the jury's shoes. We've examined the motives that could have driven O.J. Simpson to commit such a heinous crime, and we've even pondered the chilling possibility that another person may be entwined in this darkness. Jason Simpson. Through all of this, a haunting question remains. Could it be that O.J. Simpson is shielding his own flesh and blood from the consequences of a heinous crime? The circumstantial evidence is quite compelling, but the truth is just out of reach. As we close this chapter, I ask you to remember that mysteries like this are rarely neatly and tidily resolved. It's for this reason that they continue to captivate our imagination, never letting us forget their details. And I urge you to seek the truth that lies in the shadows. As we conclude, I want you to really and truly ponder this case. I want you to question everything and to always remain open to the possibility that even in the most high-profile and public cases, there might still be secrets waiting to be uncovered. Keep your mind sharp and your curiosity alive. The world of mysteries never truly sleeps. The O.J. Simpson trial, with all its twists and turns, stranger than fiction, will forever be a magical mystery.
Holy buckets. Like for like 30 years I've known that OJ did it, and now you just like blew my mind.
Right? I know.
That's all very, very, very interesting and compelling. But I don't get, so I think about the moments where he's driving with a gun in his mouth, where he's on the phone with his mom for an hour. And I just don't know if, even if I'm protecting my children, if that's how I'm acting.
I know. I see that. I know, but it could be that he would take the fall for it, but he didn't want to go to jail. Death is better than jail, maybe. That's the ultimate way to protect your kid. Could be. I know.
I mean, like, is he trying to act guilty? Is like the whole
could be
in my head while I'm driving home, like a theatrical. Don't look at my kids, look at me.
Yeah, it could be. That's a good theory right there. I like that. Yeah, it's a doozy.
Well,
and that's why it is the crime and trial of the century. Of the last century, because
I don't have my applause button, but if I did, I'd be smashing it for you, because you you turned my O.J. Simpson world on its head.
Right? I can't. Yeah, there is a book. I was going to mention it. And then there's a couple other things too. I was going to mention. The book is and Craig put it in there. It's called OJ's Innocent and I Can Prove It. It's not a new theory, but it's really coming to light now. And William Deere is interesting. I know. I don't know what that was. It wasn't my computer. I don't have a Mac. But
Wasn't a Mac.
Oh, that wasn't a Mac sound? I thought it was a Mac sound. I don't know. Well, nothing popped up on my end. But anyways, that William Deere actually to get those medical records about Jason Simpson, to find out about his prescriptions, his diagnosis, and the fact that he'd been off his medications, actually posed as a doctor in a hospital for months. So I know, a little shady, but he did. And yeah, he bought the locker contents. Like, he's all in, and he's trying to prove it was Jason. And then the other thing that I didn't go back into is that the arthritis may have actually also swollen OJ's hands. I talked about that earlier. The arthritis might have been why the gloves didn't fit as well. But, whew, man, let's see.
That's a lot.
Oh, yeah. And David also talked about the CTE, which is the trauma that happens to brain with football players and concussions. It also could have changed OJ's, like, he's so squeamish and not violent. He wasn't violent at all. The coach also mentioned that he didn't even want to hit people on the field. He would be like, if I don't have to touch somebody, I don't want to, because I don't want to hurt them.
Wow.
That was OJ when he was playing football. So there is a possibility that CTE, it really changes people's brains. If you look at it, the people are completely changed and often violent. So that is also a possibility. There's just so much to mention.
It's a lot, but we needed all of it. And
I know.
Amanda Benjamin,
Whew.
amazing job. Give it up for Amanda.
Thank you.
I know it's late.
Yeah.
It's after 11 p.m., but thankfully it's not a Thursday night. It's a Friday night.
It's
so
a Friday.
People can sleep in if you don't work on the weekends. My story is, it's not as mind-blowing, flip everything you know about it on its head, but it is freaking crazy, and I was very, very close to it. It is a murder story that I was very, very close to, and I cannot wait to tell it. Ever since we started this podcast, I've been wanting to find a reason that I could tell this story, and I'm excited to share it tonight. So if you're in for the long haul, we're going to do that. First, producer Craig's going to tell us what's coming up on the Vaudacity Network. We're going to take a couple minute break, Amanda and I, and then we will resume with a song from Amanda and my story, and then a duet.
Yay!
We're in it for the long haul tonight. Producer
right.
Craig, give it up for Producer Craig.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us tonight here on the Magical Mystery Hour. If you would like to, you don't have to, because we just enjoy the fact that you are listening to us, and we do appreciate it. Please feel free to tip our performers. What you see in front of you, if you're watching on YouTube, are the tip jars, the Venmo tip jars for Amanda and Paul. Please go ahead and tip them. Thank you very much, because we do appreciate your being a part of our audience today. Coming up on the Vaudacity Network, tomorrow night, Deep Cuts live music, and it's a special anniversary show, a birthday anniversary show, the second anniversary of Emily Thatcher's birthday. She did Deep Cuts last year. She's doing it again this year for her birthday, so that will be tomorrow night starting at 9 p.m. Please join us. Deep Cuts. It should be a very good evening, and it's uplifting is our theme. Coming up on Tuesday, as part of the Cove podcast, very special guests, John Flanagan and Ashley Morgan, Fault Lines, and we're going to be celebrating their new single, Me Without You, and that's going to drop on your favorite podcast service Tuesday, September 12th, anytime during the day. So it depends. But check your local podcast streamer for that, or you can go to covepodcast.com and find out all the various podcast streams that we participate in, and you'll find that particular podcast there. So again, this Tuesday, we'll be dropping our brand new podcast of the Cove podcast, the Carganilla Online Variety Entertainment Podcast, with special guests Fault Lines, John Flanagan and Ashley Morgan. Then on Tuesday, on the actual day of Tuesday at a specific time, 8 p.m., Gaming with Dari, episode number 27. Dari continues to amaze everybody with the variety of games that she comes up with and gets people to enjoy, to participate in. and share right here on Gaming with Dari. So episode 27 coming up this Tuesday starting at 8 p.m. Pacific. Then Amanda on Demanda comes back again this week. Well, next week, actually, with more of your requests live. Please go to amandaondemanda.com and then you can click on a special button that you can request. And I'm not sure what Amanda's got coming up as her request yet, but she usually has a theme. So go ahead and check out amandaondemanda.com, and she usually will post there. That'll be coming up this Wednesday, the 13th of September, 8 p.m. Pacific, right here on the Vaudacity Network. And we have a big event coming up on Saturday, September 16th. It's Polly's Picnic number 106 live. Music and comedy improv at a special location in the city of Orange. It's going to start at 4 p.m. Pacific. Save the date, and details will be coming soon. So that's coming up.
Nice Freudian slip. Nice slips.
Yes, Freudian slip. Sorry, they're going out to my girlfriend Sue. So there we are. But please save the date. Polly's Picnic 106, Saturday, September 16th, 4 p.m. in the city of Orange. Watch for all the details. And that's what's coming up on the Variety Network, on the Vaudacity. There we go.
Producer Craig,
I was going to say, by the way, it's Star Trek Day, so that's why I am wearing my Star Trek colors.
Love it. I don't know if anybody can see you, though, because it's OBS and stuff like that. But.
Okay. Well, anyways, if they can, but I can see that you two are back. So let's go ahead and continue with the Magical Mystery Hour, Part 2.
Since y'all can't see it, wait, hang on. If I turn my webcam toward my Zoom screen, you might be able to see that producer Craig Jackman looks just like Jean-Luc Picard on the space station. It's it's Captain Picard.
Yes.
It's Craig Jackman.
Make it so, number 1.
Yes.
Well done. Thank you, producer Craig.
Thank you. All right, here we go. Round 2, ladies and gentlemen, on the Magical Mystery Hour.
Oh, boy.
This is part 2 of our second true crime episode of Magical Mystery Hour.
Yes.
Here in season 1 of the Magical Mystery Hour. And it's Amanda's turn to perform some music.
It is.
as it usually is right before I tell a story.
Yes.
And of course, what other motivation do you need then? It's about crime.
It's about crime.
What song popped into your mind about crime?
Okay. Well, I had one pop into my mind almost immediately. I just love this. I love the artist very much. And like I said, it's one of the first. There's another one that I did actually when we did a crime one for, was it Deep Cuts?
We did a Deep Cuts crime.
We did. And so that's one I often think of Rocky Raccoon for a crime song. But this time I went actually with a Paul McCartney. I believe Paul McCartney and Wings.
Oh.
Yes. I went with Band on the Run. So I love that.
Nice.
Love this song. And it's kind of me. It's very it's crime. You're on the run. You're being arrested. But it's such a fun song. I was like, I don't want to do some depressing or murder band. I'm gonna murder. That's not me.
What was that again?
You go, don't, I'm murder.
Yes.
That's not who I am.
Well, we can't hear it. Here's Amanda Benjamin performing some Band on the Run.
Yeah. And I just I wish I laugh. I said it's so busy now. Going back to work. I hit this microphone constantly. Just so you all know. It drives me crazy after a while. But anyways, going back to work and do all this stuff. And I was like, it was so nice to have a reason to okay, I gotta pick up my guitar today. I gotta play through this at least once.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Cause I'm like, man, I haven't been playing enough lately. Can't wait to fall into the rhythm of work and school and I'm like, all right, now I'm getting back to my normal schedule. So all of that said, I have set an auto scroll. Forgive me if I have to stop and fix the auto scroll. We'll see.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah, love it. All right, so this is me. There's me. All right. Okay. Let's get this started. Okay, let me get the auto scroll a little up. Stuck inside these four walls, sent inside forever, never see no one nice again like you, Mama. Mama, you. If I ever get out of here, thought of giving it all away to a registered charity. All I need is a bite today. If I ever get out of here. If I ever get out of here. Well, the rain exploded with a mighty crash as we fell into the sun. And the first one said to the second one there, I hope you're having fun. We're searching everyone for the band on the run, for the band on the run, for the band on the run, band on the run. Well, the undertaker drew a heavy sigh, seeing no one else to come, and the bell was ringing in the village square for the rabbits on the run, for the band on the run, the band on the run, and the jailer man and Sailor Sam was searching everyone for the band on the run, for the band on the run, for the band on the run, for the band on the run. The band on the run, the band on the run, the band on the run, yeah, the band on the run. Well, the night was falling through the desert world, began to settle down. In the town they're searching for us everywhere, but we never will be found. The band on the run, the band on the run, and the county judge who held a grudge will search forevermore for the band on the run, for the band on the run, for the band on the run, for the band on the run.
Amanda Benjamin with a cover of Band on the
Band on the
Run.
Run.
That was lovely.
Isn't that a great song? I think it's a great one.
Yeah, and as producer Craig dropped in the chat, Band on the Run is noted for Paul
Yes.
McCartney and Wings.
I was pretty sure I was correct there, but sometimes,
Never know when you're not correct.
yeah,
It's
because you have the Beatles, you have like Wings, you have just solo Paul McCartney. You just want to, cover all the bases.
Fantastic job. Loved the cover.
Thanks.
And my story this evening. It's your favorite part of the night, right? You can just sit back and relax.
It really is. I love this.
And I want to thank everybody
my fan
who
on.
is still hanging out with us. We're in 14 households right now at
one second.
11:20 p.m. And you guys are our ride or dies, and we love you. We love having you here.
Oh, it's the best.
And, if we're here talking about mysteries or true crime or whatever, we're glad that you're here with us. My story begins in Long Beach, California. This was right after. I shouldn't start the intense music quite yet, because it was a time in my life. It was right after Jamie and I got married. We were living in Long Beach, and I was doing some shows at a super cute family-run theater called the All-American Melodrama in Long Beach, in Shoreline Village in Long Beach. And it was run, you can see it there on the waterline. It is the triangle pyramid-shaped green building there on the left of the screen. It was right on the water. That's the back end of the building. The front end from the parking lot, it's just this beautiful family fun friendly theater. And when you walk in, it's a small intimate place with a smallish theater that my friend Ken Parks had built. He's all about the melodrama, the old-fashioned melodrama. You cheer for the heroes, you boo the villains, you hiss at the villains when they come out. And it was just a raucous good time, so much fun. And my friend Ken Parks, he was the director of a couple of shows that I was doing at Disneyland, and he was running the theater. He was the author of a lot of the scripts that we were doing. And a lot of the melodramas were just to bring people in the door, because people wouldn't come in the door for old-fashioned shows they'd never heard of. So he would parody famous franchises and turn them into melodramas, basically. So the one that I'm talking about, it's called Idaho Smith and the Shirley Temple of Doom.
And
obviously a parody of...
Our audio podcast listeners can't see it, but it's like the best graphic. Like the second it popped up on the screen, I laughed. I was like, nobody's going to understand the podcast why I laughed, but I love it so much.
Instead of Indiana Jones, it's Idaho Smith and the Shirley Temple of Doom. And this ran January 9th, according to the graphic, through March 1st, and that was in the year 2009. And yes, Emily jokes because she knows. We'll bring those pictures up in just a second, Craig. Emily knows that my first jobs or places that I worked early on all closed. So Emily says, let me guess, the theater's closed now.
I was going to mention that I'm pretty sure we just recently ate at the restaurant that is in that building now.
Really?
There's a Cajun restaurant because it's right next to that, the white, I don't know what it is. Is it like a hotel or something? Right building right there. We ate at a Cajun restaurant with the yellow front.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Maybe it's that building.
I think it is. Like,
knows?
I'm pretty sure. I'm not 100% because, see, there's another yellow building. I'm going to put my mouse over here, and that's where I'm not sure if it's this building is the restaurant or if it's this building. But we were literally just there, the last few months and
So it's
walked
right across
through it.
the water from the Queen Mary.
Yeah.
And there's a little lighthouse on a little island, and it's right in that Shoreline Village area of Long Beach. Super cute. I worked at that Bubba Gump for a little while while we were living out there.
Yeah.
So in the show, I played the utility player, and I did a number of shows in the theater. It was just so much fun. And in most of the shows that I did, I was always the utility player because I just had so much fun in all the different roles I got to play throughout the thing. There's always the hero, there's the villain, the damsel, and the utility player. Those are pretty much your cast in these melodrama things. And I'm not quite hero material. Villains are fun. I'm not a damsel, but the utility is fun. So in this particular one, thank you, Craig, for bringing these up. I played so many different. This was my Indy. Indy's friend, the facilitator. Yes, we have something for you to go. It's a place for you to stay.
Yes.
So that was one of my roles. You see on my left or on my right, that's actually my friend Lacey. She played the damsel that night that my dad took these pictures.
Oh.
And then on the left is a fella named Dan. He was playing the villain, and he's got the German helmet on and the German coat, and he's the villain and the beard and everything. Another role that I played in the show was this was
I love it.
after the curtain call. There's like a musical number. We all do singing a song and dance, and we're all dressed. So this is basically the cast. So there's the damsel, the villain, myself, and the hero, and we're doing a little dance. And then another role that I played was the doctor. I forget my doctor voice at the time, but it was probably pretty specific. You can't see it now, but this was right after. So he's the villain, and he's got the crow on his arm. And he's in my office on a ship. There's a little porthole on the wall. And he had just had me at gunpoint, and somehow I got the gun away from him, and now I have him at gunpoint. And I'm telling him, oh, if we don't get whatever my voice was, but I was explaining to him that if he foils our plans, everyone will be doomed. So those were just a few of the roles that I played in the show, but that's Dan again. He played the villain, and
just for a moment, I forgot that we were here to talk about. I was so engaged in this, I love this. This is so cool. How fun! And it's like, oh wait,
it's a trip down memory lane.
True crime right now. You had me gripped in your story.
Well, two of the friends that I met doing the show, and I met a lot of the cast members that would come through these shows were either people that worked at Disney with myself and Ken, who ran the theater, or performers who worked at Knott's, or performers that worked at community theater in community theater productions. And so two new friends that I met during this production, one was Dan, who you just saw. He was playing the villain there. And the other is a girl named Rachel, who also worked at Disneyland at the same time I was working there. She was a cast member. She did Princess Ariel. She was at Alice in Wonderland. I think she worked very closely with our friend Todd Stubler a lot as Alice and Hatter in the parks. And so they were in this show together. They were, I can't remember if they were just dating or if they were engaged yet. But at the time, so Dan wasn't working at Disney, and I don't know what other jobs he may or may not have had. But yeah, that's him on stage with me in those scenes that I just explained. But so I got to know them during the run of the show, and it was really interesting to me because I could tell a very interesting dynamic right off the bat. Whenever they were there together, Dan was a different person. It was the craziest thing. If he was there and she was not performing that night, like the pictures we just saw, he was totally fun, very goofy, just having a great time. But anytime that she was there, he was very subdued, and he would just watch her. Like I explain it like Leo watches Jamie and I when we walk around the house. Like, what should I be doing right now? How can I please you? Kind of a thing. And I just not even knowing them at all before we started the production of this show, I found that to be it was something that I noticed. Yeah. Which was wild.
So it's disconcerting.
Yeah. And they were otherwise super friendly. They were very nice. I remember at one point they knew that I was DJing weddings at the time. One of the other heroes and damsels had just gotten married, and I had just DJ'd their wedding. So they were talking to me about well, if we ever get engaged someday. And I'm like, yeah, man, it'll be fun. So I just remember we did the show, did the run of the show. It was January through March. And Then I don't think they were in another show there. We weren't in another show there together. But we were still running the same circles. I think she was still working at Disney. But life goes on. About a year goes on, and a year goes by, and I'm doing another show there at the Melodrama, and I show up to the theater, and we're getting ready. The theater was like, there was the theater area, and then there was the kitchen where people could get their nachos and their sodas and their beers. And the cast always served the food before the show started. And I showed up for the serving of the food hour, and Ken, the theater owner, told me there has been a murder. And I went, what? So, little backstory. We're going to shift gears here for just a second. By this time, this was like a year, I want to say a year after the show that I did with Dan and Rachel closed. They were living together in an apartment in Costa Mesa in a apartment complex called the Camden Martinique. And this is right. It's where, if you can see the little red, thank you, Craig, for circling it there. It's right south of the 405 off of Harbor in Costa Mesa. So if you can see the 405, and then thanks. I guess that graphic doesn't really help anybody, but it's an apartment complex in Costa Mesa, and there's a big pool. It's known for having a younger clientele renting apartments there. Young kids in college or just out of college, and a real community. Like, a lot of them knew each other. They would hang out. There was Taco Tuesdays. I would call them apartment buddies. They would all hang out a lot, and a lot of them just kind of were friends and would hang out after work and in each other's apartments by the pool. It was a fun hang. And within that community, Dan's upstairs neighbor, I guess I could have started the dramatic music.
Oh, yeah.
Dan's upstairs neighbor was a young man by the name of Samuel Hare, or Her, depending on who's telling the story. It's spelled Herr, but Samuel Hare. He was a 26-year-old Afghanistan war veteran back home after serving our country and going back to school. He was going to Orange Coast College, working on getting his degree. His parents also lived in town. He was an only child, and he and his dad were like best friends. They would go to work or school, and then at night, Dad would come over to his apartment complex. They'd hit the gym. They'd work out. They'd have some beers and watch TV in his room, and then Dad would go home 2 or 3 nights a week. They were like besties. Like, Dad knew everything going on in Sam's life. Sam was a really, really good dude. One little caveat on that is that Sam had previously, before he went to war, been charged with murder. He was in cahoots with gang members, though not in the gang.
Okay.
And at one point, these gang members had asked him to bring a buddy of his to a location.
Oh, no.
And he brought the buddy of his to the location, and the gang members jumped him, which resulted in his buddy's death. And so Sam was charged, and the whole group was charged. Sam was eventually cleared of charges.
Right. I can't imagine that those would stick. I was thinking even an accessory to murder is tricky to convict that.
Right. So he was able to prove that he had no idea it was going to happen, and he was cleared of the charges. But it's worth mentioning.
Okay.
Because of what's about to unfold. And speaking of Sam, Dan said he was one of his best friends. And you can find interviews online where he talks about how Sam was, one of the best, most generous, kind-hearted people he'd ever met. He was always willing to help. Anytime you asked him for help, he would drop whatever he was doing and do it. They used to hang out in each other's apartments. Of course, they were like, he lived upstairs. And Sam was actually had been lending money to Dan whenever Dan was short on rent. And so we'll just talk about that for a second, because Dan, at this point, it's May 2010. Dan and Rachel are both unemployed, and they're getting ready to get married.
Right.
They had a wedding date set for May 28th, and they're ready to start their lives together and go on their honeymoon. They're going to have a lower cost beachside wedding, but they're getting ready for their honeymoon. But they're both unemployed and also being evicted from their apartment because
It just keeps getting worse.
Far behind on payments.
Okay.
But they were both still very deeply, she's not working at Disney anymore, but they're both deeply embedded in the community theater scene.
Right.
They were both actually in a show together called Nine.
Okay.
Which I keep confusing with Six.
Yeah.
For some reason. But the show is called Nine, and Dan was actually playing the leading man in this production. He was the star. And friends started to notice that things were getting weird. Like, old friends of Dan were saying that he was becoming a different kind of person now that he was with Rachel and they were getting closer to getting married.
Right.
And the Camden friends, all the buddies, the apartment buddies, were saying that at parties, there would eventually come a time they would all get together and drink. Every Tuesday taco night was in somebody else's apartment, but they'd all be together.
Okay.
Rachel started to kind of show off about how she could make Dan do whatever she wanted him to do. One popular story is about how one Taco Tuesday she had challenged Dan to kiss another man who was there at the party, and Dan said he didn't want to, and she said, if you don't, I'm gonna go home and sleep at my parents' house tonight. And so he ended up just making out with this dude at the party, and that's just one of like a lot of different stories that people would remember about how things would go. Like toward the end of the night, she would start to show, hey guys, watch, I can make Dan do whatever I want him to do. This is fun.
There's so many red flags here, like right from the beginning. I'm not.
What do you mean?
I'm not liking it.
All right. Well,
so many red
that's
flags.
Just a little backstory of what's going on.
Yikes.
Come Saturday, May 22nd, 2010. This is the Saturday before their Friday wedding. It's closing night of 9. And a 2-show day. They had a matinee and an evening show, as you are very familiar with in the community theater scene.
Yes.
Dan and Rachel are at a cast party, and they learn there has been a murder at the Camden Martinique apartment building. Their buddies are saying, get over here. We need to talk about this. We need to have a chat. So Dan and Rachel head back to the apartments, and they meet in one of the apartment buddies' places, and everybody started to talk about what's going on. There's cops everywhere. Turns out a body was found in Sam Hare's apartment, just upstairs from Dan and Rachel. It wasn't Sam. The body belonged to 23-year-old Julie Kibuishi, who was one of Sam's best friends. She was a student at Orange Coast College with Sam. They were in some of the same classes. She was considered his tutor because she was very intelligent, and she would often come over and help him study. She was described by friends and family as a very vibrant girl. She was into dance, fashion, very smart, bright future, 23 years old. And at one point, Sam's dad had asked Sam, "Is there anything going on between you two?" And Sam had just said, "Dad, no. She's like a sister to me. Like there's no chemistry, but we're totally like besties. But there's none of that." And his dad was like, "Cool." And there's no way he would lie to his dad. So totally took him at his word. But the friends gather around. Dan and Rachel are just getting to this meeting and trying to gather the facts. And what has been told is that Julie was found in Sam's bedroom, knees on the floor, bent over Sam's bed, with a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. Her jeans had been like cut open in the back.
Okay.
And there was something written on the back of her top that said something like, "All yours now, F you." Which was just totally confusing to everybody. But they're all shocked and devastated because Julie used to hang out in the crowd. She used to come to taco nights and just hang out there at the apartments. And the fact that she's murdered in Sam's apartment was kind of a shock to everybody.
Right.
But the biggest thing was, where is Sam? When is the last time you saw Sam?
Right.
So they all start sharing stories about when was the last time we saw Sam. I don't know why that. I was like, saw Sham. I was trying to make it harder.
She sells seashells.
So they all have this conversation. At one point, Rachel grabs Dan's hand and says, "We're leaving," and pulls him out, and they're gone. And police have started their investigation now. They obviously, murder suspect number one is Sam.
Although I don't, I do. I mean, obviously he is number one, but I feel like the writing on the back of her top, to me, that sounds like, and the fact that she's laying on, not on the bed, but like over the bed, to me, that's more of a message to Sam saying she's all yours. Like somebody thought they were, like her boyfriend thought she was cheating on him, and now she's yours. That's just my immediate thought.
I love hearing that. And I don't know if I'm going to dig into it tonight, but she was seeing a fella that was also in the apartment community there, but a guy by the name of Dave. And gosh, I'm going to have to talk about that later just because you mentioned it. But the main takeaway was Sam and Julie were not romantically involved. Right. They were really just buddies. So it was confusing to everyone that she was found in this fashion in his room with that written on the back of her shirt. And so the police are looking, and Sam's dad, Steve, like I mentioned, they were best friends, and they hung out 3 or 4 days a week. And Steve felt like he knew everything about Sam. He knew his friends. He knew his like habits. And so Steve starts like an investigation of his own while the police are starting theirs, because Steve knows, like, my son's been charged with murder. He's handled guns in the military.
Right.
He's an obvious suspect right now. So he starts talking to all of Sam's friends, and the police are talking to all of Sam's friends. Police are getting statements, and somehow, I mean, obviously, maybe it was the family relation, but Steve is able to get Sam's bank activity first before the cops. And he starts to notice that money is being withdrawn from Sam's savings account.
Interesting.
$400 a day.
The max withdrawal.
Which is the maximum withdrawal from different ATMs throughout the city of Long Beach.
Interesting.
So during this time, of course, he takes it to the police, and the police start looking at it as well.
Yeah, because they can look, like, if it's ATMs, there's going to be cameras. There's, you can figure this out.
Yeah. Um, if your criminal is not very smart. So during this time that this is all happening, it's a couple of days. They're getting their bounds for their basis for investigation, and the autopsy comes back and shows that one gunshot wound to the back of Julie's head is actually two in the same spot that nobody could actually see who was there in the room at the time.
What?
The entry points were so close. It looked like one. But it
Right.
was two.
That's really precise. Or accidental, I guess.
Quick. Double tap.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, like, you're always going to have a recoil and a, you know, like, I feel like you have to know what your hand is, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So they start finding these ATM videos from the banks.
Okay.
And it's a white male with a ball cap and sunglasses on. And they can't tell who it is, but they can tell that it's not Sam and it's not anyone they've talked to.
Okay. Yeah, like body type and
right.
You can tell approximate height, stuff like that.
Then they start to make purchases from a certain pizza place. And the first purchase that is made is a carryout. So, and the pizza place didn't have cameras.
Of course not.
The next night was delivery to an address.
Okay.
So the police, Costa Mesa PD, they go all out. They order the house to be surrounded. They have a helicopter in the air. Whoever is in there, they're gonna bring them out and get the story. But as they're pulling up and the helicopter starts circling, this kid opens the door and looks out like, what's going on out here?
Right.
What's all the commotion?
Yeah.
It's a 17-year-old boy by the name of Wesley. And the police go, "Oh, hey, did you order that pizza?" And he goes, "Yeah, I did." And they go, "Oh, okay. We got some questions for you. Can you come with us?" And he's like, "Sure." So Wesley goes with the police down to the station to answer some questions about how he got this card.
And did you say how old he is? You said he's a kid, but like
17.
Okay.
17.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Not an adult, still technically not an adult.
Yeah.
And so he ends up being identified as the person withdrawing the $400.
Okay.
Which he has done every day since Sam went missing.
Right.
So they say, "Hey, so tell us about this money that you're withdrawing from these ATMs." And he says, "Oh, a family friend of mine is a bail bondsman, and he said that he needs to collect this money for one of the jobs he's working on, but he doesn't have time, so would I just start withdrawing $400 a day and then he'll give me a cut?" And they go, "Okay, who's the family friend of yours?" And he says, "Oh, his name is Dan Wozniak." And the detectives go, "Oh, we've spoken to him. He lives downstairs from Sam. We need to bring him in." So they can only assume that he's working with Sam. He knows where Sam is, and Sam's trying to get his money out while he's on the run. And so the police make arrangements to go collect Dan. And it happens to be on Wednesday, May 26th, 2 days before his wedding. Dan is having a bachelor party at a local sushi restaurant They've got the back room. He's got a big table with 9 of his buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And the cops just kind of walk in, plain clothes, show their badges, and say, "We need to take you down to the station." And they lift him from his very own bachelor party to bring him in for questioning.
Because they're looking for a Sam on the run.
Yes.
For a Sam on the run.
We're gonna have to change. We're gonna have to go back and
Yes, for
re-record
the
that and change it to
podcast, it's
Sam
gonna be
on
the
Run.
Sam on the run.
So they sit Dan down, and they say, "Okay,
Okay.
where's Sam?" And Dan says, "I don't know. I don't know where Sam is." "Okay, so why are you having this child withdraw money from Sam's bank account?" So Dan says, "All right, you want the truth?"
I thought he was just gonna
Sam?
say, "I didn't. The kid lied." Oh no.
Sam wanted to defraud the bank and say his bank card got stolen and he had no idea. And then like a month later, go to the bank and say, "Hey, $400 got taken out of my account every day. And I didn't have my card. I didn't know what was happening."
Mm-hmm.
And Sam asked me, because he didn't want to do it directly, to have somebody do it. And then we could work the money
Right.
out.
He'd get a cut. Okay.
And the
Because
cops
he needs
go,
money at this point. Right? Because they're being evicted. He's got a wedding.
And the cops go, "Okay, so it's a bank fraud for money. Why is Julie dead?" And Dan goes, "Oh, I don't. Here's what I know. So, like the day before we were gonna start this fraud, Sam came down to my apartment and was like, 'Hey, Julie and I, we've been in this romantic triangle thing. I'm under a lot of pressure. I need to get out of here. I killed her. She's in my apartment. Will you, can we still carry out this fraud? And can you help me escape?" And Dan's like, "Well, since you've been such a good friend, sure. How can I help?" And Sam's like, "Just drop me off at this strip mall in Long Beach." And Dan's like, "Okay, great." So they get in the car. Dan drives them to the strip mall in Long Beach, where he meets up with a guy in a black baseball cap. And he drops Sam off. Sam shakes the guy's hand, and they get in the car. And they were gone.
This
And
is
so-
such a weird story to me. I don't. It's a little bit stinky.
Imagine being a detective
I know. It's
in the
just like
room.
really like you're doing this for what, like $500 in the end of this, because you're not getting the whole cut. That they're not going to be very long before they shut down that card. You're going to get maybe like $1,000, and you're willing to cover up a murder.
Yeah.
This isn't adding up to me.
So they check with him again. They're like, what kind of car did they get into? What kind of color of car? And Dan's like, I don't know. And so there's 2 detectives in the room. One of them gets up and goes, "All right, I'm going to go check with the strip mall and see if they've got video surveillance from that day and that time." And he leaves. And as soon as he leaves, somebody brings in a DNA test kit.
Ooh.
And the detective remaining starts to swab Dan for DNA. And Dan's like, why are you testing my DNA?
Getting anxious.
The detective says, "Because we're charging you with accessory to murder."
Yeah. You just literally admitted you're defrauding a bank and you helped a murderer get away. What did you think was going to happen? Oh my God.
So Dan starts to go, oh, I'm being charged with it.
Let me change my
And
story.
They said, yeah, that's why we arrested you. That's what we told you when we arrested you. And they're like, he's like, oh, okay. I guess just the act of being tested kind of escalated his.
Oh no. Sorry, I just had like a, oh no, I hope that is not what's happening here. But keep going. Like, I just had that like, bing moment.
So the guy who went to call for the tape, the camera tape from the strip mall comes back, and they're finishing up the DNA test, and Dan just casually says to the guy who went to check the tape, you know what, I'm really sorry. I was stressed out and I was really nervous. I made up the guy with the black baseball cap. And the detectives are like,
Yeah, we know.
oh, you did? Why did you do that? And he's just like, I don't know. I was nervous. I'm just anxious. I'm not comfortable being here in the police station. And they're like, okay, well, they take the DNA kit out of the room. Somebody comes and collects it, and they go, right, Dan. They're just like looking at each other like, this guy, what does he know that he's just not telling us?
Yep.
So they say, Dan, where in Sam's apartment are we going to find your DNA? Which is like kind of a brilliant ask.
Right.
Like, he could just be like, nowhere.
Yeah.
But he goes, well, probably the bathroom.
Okay.
I used the bathroom.
Fair.
The balcony. I was out on his balcony, and they say, okay, when and why were you there?
Yeah. Good question.
And then he changes his story. He says, well, when Sam came down and said he was in a lot of trouble and Julie's body was upstairs, then he said he had to pack. So I went with him upstairs, and I was really nervous to be in the room with Julie's body. And so I went out to the balcony, and I spent a lot of time out there. And I just spent some time, in the bathroom, just being nervous about being around it. And they said, okay. All right, so in the bathroom and the balcony, those are between the bathroom and the balcony, there's the bed where Julie was.
Oh, okay.
Where on Julie's body are we going to find your DNA? And Dan says, probably like on her clothes. And they said, why are we going to find it on her clothes? He says, well, because I was like walking by. And they said, well, that's not how this actually works. That's not how you transfer
I was
DNA.
walking by and one of my hairs fell out and flew into her.
He goes, all right. So I just wanted to make sure she was actually dead, and we couldn't help her. So I got really close and I like leaned over her.
Okay. You could have said I took her pulse. Just say, like, this guy's not... You're clearly not a true crime enthusiast. I'm just saying.
Not the brightest.
Come on.
So they say, all right. And still the main focus is finding Sam. And they say, okay, so what did you see when you were leaning over her? Can you describe to us what you saw? And he said, yeah, well, her, it looked like she had been assaulted. Her jeans were ripped. There was some writing on her back. And 2 gunshot wounds in her head. And
That's interesting.
The detectives looked at each other like...
Right there.
The only people who knew there were 2 gunshots were the medical examiner and law enforcement. Oh. Okay. So he keeps putting himself deeper and deeper into this hole.
Like the quicksand.
Uh,
Just saying.
so they say, all right, listen, we know you were there when she was killed. Where is Sam? And Dan's totally flustered. He's freaking out. He's like starting to lose his mind. And he's like, can I just call Rachel? Can I call Rachel? I'm supposed to get married day after tomorrow. Can I call my fiance? And they're like, sure. It's on a recorded line. We'd love to hear what you have to say to your fiance right now. They don't say that to him, but that's their thought, obviously.
Do they have to?
Let him?
No, do they have to tell him it's a recorded line? Like, don't you have to tell people when they're being recorded?
I think it says automatically.
Oh, okay.
When you make a call, calling on a recorded line.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
I don't know.
Well, he talks to Rachel. Rachel is sitting in the driveway of his parents' house on her cell phone. And she tells him, I've been canceling the wedding plans all day. I'm just leaving your parents' house. And I just told him what was going on, that you were under arrest, and because he had just been plucked out of his bachelor party.
Right.
And he's like, I'm so sorry, baby. Like, I'm really sorry. And so finally she says, as we were getting ready to leave, your brother Tim pulled up, and he says he has evidence he needs to hide. What is this evidence, babe? And then Dan starts to lose it even more. He's just like, I can't. Don't let him hide anything. And Rachel's like, no, I'm not going to let him hide anything. I'm taking it to detectives right now because, like, what evidence is this, Dan? I'm taking it to the detectives. And Dan just loses his mind. He goes back into the room with the detectives and he says, all right, listen, I'm going to tell you everything. I'm going to tell you everything. And they're like, great, that's what we've been asking for. And he says, okay, I killed Sam, and then I killed Julie. And they're like, okay. Well, you've told us so many lies already.
Yeah.
We're not quite sure we believe you, but let's hear it. He goes on to tell so many stories and change them so many times that I won't waste your time with them.
Wow.
And I will just tell you the sequence of events as it ended up going down. Sam and Dan were good friends. Dan considered Sam to be one of his best friends, and Sam actually was loaning Dan and Rachel money so that when they could get by rent, so they could get by with rent, as I mentioned earlier. Well, one of the times that he had gone and withdrew some money, Dan was with him, and Dan watched him punch in his PIN at the ATM and saw that Sam actually had $65,000 in savings from all of his time in Afghanistan. It was just in the bank. He wasn't spending money.
Yeah.
So Friday, May 21st, which was the day before everybody found out that Julie was dead, Dan had asked Sam to help him move some furniture in a theater that he worked at one time. There's a theater in Los Alamitos on a military base that Dan knew how to get into and knew would be vacant that day. And he brought Sam up to the second floor, the attic of the theater, and positioned himself behind Sam at one point when they were about to lift a big couch or something. Dan had his father's gun and shot Sam in the back of the head. Sam fell to the ground and said, I think I just got electrocuted or something, and looked up at Dan, and Dan shot him in the head again, killing him.
Wow.
Dan then tucked his body away so if somebody happened to come into the theater that night, they wouldn't find it. and went to the theater where he would perform as the leading man in 9 that night. He does his performance, goes home with Rachel. They're sitting in the apartment, and Dan has Sam's cell phone. He's texting Julie, "Hey, could you come over? I'm having some issues. No sex. I need somebody to talk to, and I got some family things going on. I'm really stressed out." And she says, "Yeah, gross, Sam. No sex, of course, but yeah, I'll come over. I'll be there at like midnight." When Julie arrives, Dan is knocking on Sam's door, and he goes, "I'm really worried about Sam. He was texting me, and now he's not answering. I actually have a key to his apartment. Let's go in." They go in together. They look around. There's no Sam because he's already been murdered.
Right.
Dan goes into the bathroom. He's trying to gather himself to kill another person, get his wits up. Goes back out, and he tells Julie, "Hey, look, what is that on Sam's bed?" Julie goes to take a closer look. Dan steps behind her and shoots her twice in the back of the head. He cuts open her jeans with scissors to make it look like it's some sort of sexual assault.
Right.
And scribbles some weird phrase on her back, just so cops would think Sam did it, I guess, in a fit of rage somehow. And he leaves her there, goes back downstairs, and hangs out with Rachel, and they go to bed. Saturday, May 22nd, he wakes up. It's a normal morning. He happens to go to his parents' house and pick up some saws and an axe. Then drives to the theater, does the matinee performance of 9.
Oh my God.
Drives out to the other theater, murder theater, dismembers Sam's body in the attic with the saws and the axe.
Mm-hmm.
It's
wow.
You can find recordings of him talking about it. He said he was just laughing hysterically while he was doing it because he couldn't believe he was doing it. Cutting off his arms, his legs, decapitated him, wrapped him up in a tarp, put him in his own car, took him to a park in Long Beach called El Dorado Park. It's like a wilderness preserve. It's like right off the freeway if you're driving to Disneyland, actually.
Okay.
And he just scatters his pieces all like under bushes here, under a tree here, over by the wash there.
Yeah. Wow.
Hoping no one would ever find them. And as long as no one found these pieces, he could keep withdrawing $400 out of the ATM every day.
Wow. Also not a good plan. Like somebody's going to find these
right
pieces. Like you're putting pieces of human under a bush. Like someone's going to find them. They're going to rot. They're going to stink. A dog's going to find it. Like
not the smartest criminal.
No.
Yeah. And so after he's hidden every piece of Sam's body in this park in Long Beach, he goes back to the theater for closing night of his show. Cast members would say he was on fire that night. It was the most amazing show he had ever performed. He was just in it and slaying.
Literally and figuratively.
After the show, cast party, they find out Julie's body's been discovered in Sam's apartment. And you know the story from there. A week goes by. Saturday, May 29th, which was a week, as I just mentioned, after closing night. 3 days after Dan's arrest and the night after Dan and Rachel were supposed to get married.
Mm-hmm.
On Sam's 27th birthday, his father got the call that they had located his son's head under a bush in this park.
Unbelievable.
Dan went to trial. He was convicted And in 2016, he was given the death penalty. He now still sits on death row because laws have changed and we're not putting people to death in California.
Right.
So he's technically on death row until laws change again, and we are. And his master plan was to frame Sam for the murder of Julie and just slowly drain Sam's $62,000 from savings, $400 a day, without getting caught. And what a wasteful way to end a life. But as this is the Magical Mystery Hour, that is not the mystery that we are still faced with. We know exactly what Dan did. Dan has confessed to it. He has been charged with it and convicted of it. The mystery here, in my opinion, is whose plan was it?
That's what I've been wondering.
I mentioned his relationship with Rachel and the ways she would show people and proudly display that she could control him. A lot of people, a lot of friends went to the police and said, hey, we think it was probably her idea. She started to feel some pressure. She decided to go on the Dr. Phil show to play the victim. She wanted to tell America that the wool was completely pulled over her eyes. She was duped by Dan Wozniak, and poor Disney princess had just been, her life was ruined because of this man that she thought she knew and she thought she loved. Dr. Phil, I don't know if the staff told her that Sam's dad was waiting in the wings.
Probably not.
Came out and sat down right across from Rachel and said, I am absolutely offended that you would come out and you would do this on national television when so many people think you put him up to this.
Yep.
And that started a whole wave of media speculation and more investigating into the case. A lot of the detectives that were on the case from the very beginning, this was no surprise. They all kind of wondered if what had happened, what had transpired, was her plan all along,
right?
For many different reasons. But with the evidence they were able to gather, with the cold hard evidence, like we talked in the O.J. Simpson case, what could they charge her with? They didn't want to go to court with weak evidence that they wouldn't win on, and then they could never try it again.
Yeah, exactly.
So the best that they thought was they could pin on her right at the moment was accessory after the fact.
Right.
And so she went to court for that, and on November 8th, 2018, Rachel Buffett was found guilty of accessory after the fact to the murders and sentenced to 32 months in prison, which she served, and she is now out on after serving. But so many people still, even though this was 13 years ago, I can't believe this was 13 years ago, but it was 13 years ago that this happened. People are still, it is a very active thing. I just, in getting ready for tonight, found new podcasts, new sources of information of people who are looking into this and still trying to charge her with murder, because if you can prove that the idea was hers, they planned it together, she could still be charged, even though she didn't pull the trigger.
There's no double jeopardy yet. Like, they didn't charge her.
That's right. So the investigations are still ongoing. There's still a whole lot of stuff being uncovered. People are looking into the fact that her original statement to police was that the last time she saw Sam was leaving their apartment complex with Dan, Sam, and the guy in the black hat all got in a car together and left.
Okay.
And so they said, wait, Dan admitted that the guy in the black hat was made up from the very beginning. So you guys had already made a story about something.
Or she knew and didn't say anything. Like, that's the other thing. If he told her the story, like, okay, I'm going to cover my tracks. I'm going to tell somebody else this story. She still knew and didn't say anything.
There's a whole group of the apartment buddies' friends who are telling detectives about this meeting that they had the night that it happened. News stories are coming out where she, at one point during this, Dan was talking during the meeting and she said, "Shut up, Dan, you're ruining my story."
Right.
And nobody was like,
yeah.
Until now, I guess.
Yeah.
And then remember they ended up storming out.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. I was like, was it getting too heated? And that's why they left.
There is, as you asked, the possible love triangle. So there's a gentleman named Dave who ran in that crowd that Julie was seeing.
Right.
He admitted to dating Julie, and they had become official 2 nights before the murder. But it's also said that he had a little fling, a little affair with Rachel.
Oh.
Not too long before, behind Dan's back. And now that he was with Julie, why was Julie really lured there to begin with? Not because Dan wanted it to happen.
Yeah.
New evidence has come out that Rachel actually emailed Julie 50 minutes before Julie was killed.
What?
About how once she gets back from their honeymoon, they should hang out because she feels a connection with her. We'll hang out by the pool. We'll go get some girl time. It'll be really fun. 50 minutes before she was killed, and while she was already on her way over there to be killed. The money's very stressful, and
it is.
that is all. It can control your life. But for me, I think, how amazing is the timing that he was arrested and charged with murder and put away right before their wedding.
Yeah.
If you had ever said yes to an engagement that you later regretted and thought, maybe I don't want to marry this guy, what better way than to just put him away for life for killing some people?
I can see it.
This continues to be explored and investigated, as I mentioned, all of this time later, and hopefully someday the Kibuishi family and the Hare family will feel some sort of justice has been done. As for right now, as I mentioned, Dan is still waiting on death row, and Rachel has served 32 months and is now out among us. I just think, for me, I don't know if you can bring it up, Craig, just slide 9 again. For me, it's still wild to look at because, even if you're a fan of true crime, if you listen to true crime podcasts, and it's interesting for you to hear, and it's so different to think I was standing next to that person.
Right.
I was in their lives at a time where he could have been looking at me as a potential target.
Yeah, it's funny, like people who aren't in theater don't quite get what happens. Like, it's funny, you have these people in your life, like these people in your life, and they just become like this intricate part for this time. Like, they're like a family to you. And it's funny because they come and go. But yeah, they become like I said, like family. They just become a part of your life and your heart. And some of them stay there forever. And like I said, some of them leave, but you feel like they're still with you. It's really interesting. And then to think that somebody you felt that way about can just do this.
And wild to think, like, he played the villain. He had me at gunpoint every night we did the show.
Yeah.
I had him at gunpoint, and it just hits. It makes it more real. Like, you always think, well, nothing like that could happen to me. I would never just be murdered and dismembered because like I'm likable. So is Sam, and he had no idea he would be betrayed and murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And life is so precious, and
It is.
gosh, we have to count our blessings while we have them. And I don't want to like say you can never be too careful, but like things like this just make you think like,
Yeah.
gosh, you can never be too careful.
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely. If something is telling you, if you have that like something's wrong in this situation, like listen, even if it seems normal, there could be something going on.
If you feel like something's off or a little sus,
Yeah.
maybe it is.
Call a friend.
Trust that hair on the back of your neck.
I try to tell people where I'm going. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, like if I'm outside of my normal, I'm like, hey, this is where I'm going to text them where I am. So there's a record here. Here I am. I'm with so-and-so.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another, just like, if you wanted to dig deeper, I just like, believe it or not, that was the nutshell version. But if you wanted to dig deeper, you can learn so much more about this just by Googling it. There's so many podcasts, as I mentioned.
I definitely want to learn more.
I'm listening
I'm
to one right
intrigued.
now called Sleuth. That's all about. It's a season about this particular case, and the investigative journalist that's putting it together was saying that on the phone that Sam took from Julie, Dan had actually said when he was texting Julie, "Oh, I helped my friend Dan move some furniture earlier today,"
Mm-hmm.
and she believes that Rachel saw that text and said, well, now we have to kill her too. Like, 'cause nobody else knew where he was.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And then there's just so much more. Like the Friday night, the night before, Rachel was acting all dramatic in the break room and the dressing room of the show.
Okay, yeah.
And one of her cast members was like, are you okay? And she said, oh, one of my really good friends is missing. And I don't know what's happening. And they were like, this was like a full 36 hours before Julie's body was even discovered.
Mm-hmm.
She was making up stories, and it's just wild.
I was wondering if you have a sense of how smart she is.
I don't think either of them are very smart.
Okay. Because it's one of those things like if she was really good and feeding the plans, that's weird because, you know, it was such a bad plan.
Yeah.
But if they're both, then it's kind of up in there. Like, because it could be, you know, my thoughts were if he did it without her, I still feel like she probably had, like, the minute that you said he started telling these stories, like, oh no, she told him to do it. Yeah, that was the first thing. I was like, okay. And then, but it's the same thing. It could be something where she was like, we need the money and you're going to get it.
Yeah.
And then he went off, you know, and did this.
How can you get it?
But it could be more. It could be that she made the plan and said, you have to do this or else we're not getting married.
Sam's dad went and talked to Dan while he was in prison several times. They had like 6-hour-long conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, Dan told Sam, you know, or Steve,
Yeah.
Sam's dad, Sam wasn't my first target. I was focused on my parents. Like he was going to kill his parents. And he just like chickened out at the last minute and switched his focus to Sam, which is just like,
That's like some kind of psychopath stuff there.
Very, very much so.
Wow.
Yes. But as we close that story out, and I say you can find more about it if you want to dig deeper, but I just want to send some love out to the Hare and the Kibuishi families. They had a huge part of their lives taken from them, and for no reason, for $400 a day.
Yeah. Very sad.
Well, how's that podcast going, you guys?
Yeah, somebody give us a little ray of hope in all of that, you know. It's hard. It is hard with true crime to to keep it in perspective and to keep it from getting to you sometimes, you know, for sure. But
Yeah.
like I said, there's always hope, and you know, people are looking, and I always say, like, it's amazing to live in the time we live in because we have so much technology and knowledge at our hands. It seems like so much is possible that we could find out the answers to these things.
Yeah, and now, I mean, I feel like if there is a ray of hope and a positive note we could end a true crime episode about, like, it's got to be getting harder with
Yes.
tracking cell phones, pinging cell phones, tracking
Video, facial recognition,
DNA evidence.
Mm-hmm.
You got to think, like, even people as not intelligent as Dan and Rachel would think a second time these days
Mm-hmm.
about doing something like this. But
Yeah.
Well, thanks for hanging out with us on a Friday night. We're gonna send y'all out with a really fun duet about people being murdered.
All love and respect to the victims we've talked about today. But we do try to, like, do something lighter with our duets because, especially on this kind of show where we have something heavy, it's nice to have that little levity in the end as something to do that. Like, you know, the Goldman family suffered so much and are still waiting, you know, on their payments that they're probably never going to get. The families in your story are waiting for answers. It's rough. But like I said, in life, we have to sometimes look for something to lift our spirits. And that's why we try to keep our end of the show a little lighter, even in these heavy topics.
And if Michael Jackson couldn't sing a song about murder and make you want to dance, who else could?
It's true.
Of course, we'll slow it down and make it more about murder.
Yeah, because look at us. Listen to us.
I'm excited to hear it. I sent,
Yeah.
as we do these duets, I sent Amanda my side of it and said, do what you can and will and can possibly figure out to make this work.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I haven't heard it yet, so I'm excited to hear it.
So exciting. All right. Well, here we go. Ready for a duet.
As he came into the window, it was the sound of a crescendo.
He came into her apartment. He left blood stains on the carpet.
She ran underneath the table. He could see she was unable.
So she ran into the bedroom. She was struck down. It was her doom.
Annie, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay, Annie? Annie, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay, Annie? Annie, are you okay? Will you tell us that you're okay? There's a sign in the window that he struck you a crescendo. He came into your apartment. He left bloodstains on the carpet. Then he ran into the bedroom. You were struck down. It was your doom. You've been struck by a smooth criminal. Annie, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay, Are you okay? Are you okay, Annie? Annie, are you okay? Will you tell us that you're okay? There's a sign in the window that he struck you a crescendo. He came into your apartment, he left bloodstains on the carpet. Then you ran into the bedroom, you were struck down, it was your doom. You've been hit by, you've been struck by a smooth criminal. Very fun. Fantastic job with that.
Yeah, that was great. I was like, oh, hey. And listening to it now, like when you first do it, you're like, it's fine. And those two, I was like, it's pretty good.
Very much enjoyed it. And
Yeah.
you're so much at the mercy of just like whatever I send you, and you're like, I gotta figure something out.
I got it. Yeah,
You
it's
killed it.
sometimes like in the past I've been like, no, but like not with what you do, but like I'm like I can't figure this out. Like I have to sit and like I don't know. This one was like I had a really nice. Just I loved it. I was like it came so naturally. I was like, all right.
Wow, that was quite a magical mystery hour right there.
It was. It's 12. What time is it? 12:30. Wow.
It's fine. It's
That's
Friday night.
awesome. Yeah.
We love you all for being
I'm
here. Everybody
for
who's
it.
still here, we love you. We appreciate you so much.
Yes.
And for everybody out there in the internets, if you're on the podcast or the YouTube, we want to say thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Magical Mystery Hour.
If you enjoyed tonight's stories and you don't want to miss out on the next, please be sure that you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss any future shows as well as great music and comedy.
Please leave the show a positive review and help more people who like this kind of show find our Magical Mystery Hour.
We'd like to thank producer Craig Jackman and our social media team of Dari Mills, Christina Beelan, and Heather Dingus for their promotional support.
Thank you again to this episode's sponsor, Emily Thatcher. And a big thank you to David Benjamin for composing and recording our theme music.
Until the next mystery, good night.